Hello and welcome back to my channel, What If Deku 2.0. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today, we're kicking off the second part of our series, What If Introvert Deku Had a Flame Quirk? If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is Razuhfy from fanfiction.net. All the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. Momo smiled to herself as she changed out of her hero costume, idly listening to the minor small talk between the rest of the girls in the class. Ashido was being her boisterous self, giggling and laughing as she traded gossip with Hagakure-san. Gyro sighed quietly as she slipped off her amp boots. I really got the short end of the stick today. Momo glanced at the girl as she began to redress herself. I think you did well, all things considered, Gyro-san. Most of our classmates would have struggled with Kaminari-san as their partners due to his quirk. I think you did well. I guess. The petite girl responded with a quiet sigh. I wasn't able to touch Ashido cause she was so fast. And even when I did manage to corner her, you'd be there to get her out of the situation and force me back. I don't know, man. It's just kinda annoying. She griped, more so to herself out of frustration with today's events. Come on, Gyro. Ashido spoke with a giggle, wrapping an arm around the girl and pulling her close. I think you did pretty good. Your quirk isn't really suited for close combat like mine is. If one of your sound amp wave thingies had managed to hit me, I'm sure I'd have been out of commission. Gyro glanced towards the girl with an appreciative smile. Yeah, I guess. Her eyes dipped lower, smile turning flat. Can you? Oh, I don't know. Maybe put on some clothes before trying to comfort me next time. I'd appreciate it. Ashido pulled away from the girl with a mischievous grin, revealing the girl to be in nothing more than a pair of white panties and a polka-dotted bra. What's wrong with giving a pep talk in your underwear? Everything, Gyro answered immediately, rolling her eyes with a growing smirk. Ashido-san, please put on some clothes. Momo spoke as she buttoned her uniform. Gyro-san, don't take today's loss to heart. We are all going to fail or underperform at some point. It is best to think of these experiences as opportunities of growth. What Momo said. The acid quirk user spoke up, twirling in a circle, still refusing to properly dress herself. Ashido-san, please. Momo murmured as she looked away from the girl. I appreciate it, Yayarazu. Gyro replied with a small smile, feeling better about her loss despite the sting of not being able to show off her skills. I like that we finally got to. The purple-haired girl paused, head tilting to see the side as her earphone jacks caught a faint noise. They snaked around for a moment before elongating and moving towards one of the walls of the locker room, garnering the attention of all the girls in the room. What's up, Gyro? Ashido asked with a curious brow, finally deciding to properly dress herself. Gyro was quiet as she plugged one of her earphone jacks into the wall, remaining quiet. An annoyed expression bled to life on her face before she muttered angrily. That little weirdo. Gyro stood to her feet, not removing her earphone jack, before moving along the wall searching for something. Gyro-san, Momo questioned with furrowed eyebrows. Is something going on? Not for long. The girl grumbled while clenching her fist. That stupid pervert might have found a hole somewhere in the wall, and is trying to look through it. I'm gonna teach him a lesson. Gyro's other earphone jack wriggled like a snake as she crouched near the supposed hole in the wall. She was just about to stab it through the wall before widening her eyes and moving away from the wall, and crying out a warning. Watch out. Izuku sighed quietly as he removed his costume, idly listening to the conversations from some of his male classmates. While his fight with Bakugo could have gone better, along with the subsequent criticism from one of his friends pertaining to his decisions on said fight, his day hadn't been that bad. He at least got to display a bit of his combat prowess and showcase his skills in a controlled environment. He was in the process of removing his vest when someone sat next to him and began speaking. So, how do you do it? Izuku blinked at the sudden question, turning towards the person who was speaking. He questioned Kaminari, staring at the boy nervously. How do you manage to bag 3 hotas already? It's only the second day of school. The blonde teen cried as he pulled on his hair. What do you have that I lack? Izuku could only stammer in confusion at the boy's words. What was Kaminari-san even talking about? What 3 hotas? Wait, was he talking about Ashido, Gyro and Yayarazu? What do you mean by that, Kaminari-san? Izuku questioned with furrowed eyebrows, his nervousness slowly disappearing. Come on, Midoriya, you know exactly what he means. Another voice spoke up from the opposite side of the locker room. How did you manage to get one of the sexiest girls in class to hang all over you? Izuku glanced over towards Mainta, staring at the boy with furrowed brows. I have no idea what you're talking about. No girls are hanging all over me. Yaoyorozu-san, Ashido-san and Jiro-san are my friends. Stupid stutters. They'd never go away. But still, his point stood. Come on guys. Kirishima piped up with a concerned expression. Don't talk about the girls like that. It ain't manly. Manly, Mainta cried incredulously. Have you seen the curves on Yaoyorozu? She'd make a man out of anyone. Izuku felt something off. His face scrunched up in annoyance and he felt embers burn in his chest. He'd only feel like this when dealing with Bakugo. Why were Mainta's words bothering him? Mainta-san. Izuku spoke quietly. Don't talk about Yaoyorozu-san like that. Mainta, oblivious to the boy's tone, did not share the secrets. Midoriya, it's gotta be your quirk. You're not that good looking to attract two beauties like Yaoyorozu and Ashido. Izuku's fists clenched tightly, embers of flame slowly forming around his hands. Kaminari could feel the heat from Midoriya's quirk, eyes glancing down towards the boy's fist. His lips parted for a moment before he slowly scooted away from the fire quirk user. Hey Mainta, maybe you should tone it down a bit. Kaminari might not be the smartest guy in the room, but he knew danger when he saw it. Midoriya wasn't a pushover. The guy may be slightly awkward and nervous most of the time, but he wasn't someone to mess around with. No one could ignore the boy's entrance exam feats in the hero versus villains mock-up test. The guy knew how to use his quirk and took out one of the heavier hitters in the class with relative ease. Short story. Don't fuck with Midoriya. Don't be a stick in the mud, Kaminari. The short teen replied, waving the boy's warning off. Mainta's eyes roamed along the wall for a moment before his eyes widened. Guys, check it out. It seemed our upper classmates blessed us. The diminutive pervert pointed towards a relatively small hole in the wall. It's a hole with direct line of sight into the girls' locker room. Hey man, that's not manly at all. Kirishima spoke up with a frown, slowly standing to his feet. Don't go looking through that. Izuku's fists only clenched tighter and in response, Kaminari scooted even further away. Dude, maybe we should cover it up. That's not cool. Kaminari suggested nervously, briefly glancing towards Izuku. Mainta ignored the two teens as he crouched near the hole. What gloriousness will we see today? I can see it now. Yaoyorozu's perfect curves and wide hips. The boy giggled to himself before slowly leaning his head down to gaze through the hole. Most of the other boys in the locker room frowned at the boy's tone, even a few of them actually getting up to move Mainta from spying on the girls in their class. They didn't have to in the end. Izuku propelled himself forward using his flames, reaching Mainta before grabbing the boy by the back of his head and slamming his face into the wall, shaking the locker room from the sheer force. The fire user began to conjure flames along his arm, slowly twirling down his skin before wrapping around his wrist, licking dangerously at the side of Mainta's face. What did I just say? Izuku questioned quietly, staring down at Mainta with a fierce glare. Don't talk about Yaoyorozu-san like that. He proceeded to exert pressure on Mainta's head, pushing the boy's head deeper into the now cracked wall. Mainta cried out in pain, clenching his eyes shut as he apologized. I'm sorry, I won't say anything about Yaoyorozu anymore. I swear. Izuku's flames started to swirl around his arm, dancing in the air and wriggling around Mainta's head. I swear. Uncle. Izuku pursed his lips as he stared down at Mainta. He was silent for several seconds, allowing the boy to feel the heat of his flames for a moment or two. He idly entertained the thought of just allowing them to. Izuku felt a hand lay itself atop his flaming arm, slowly snuffing out the flames. He blinked at the hand in surprise before noticing that a stream of steam was emanating from the area. Don't. He isn't worth it, Midoriya. Green eyes snapped to the stoic voice, staring into a pair of heterochromatic eyes. What? Todoroki. Shoto Todoroki stared into Izuku's eyes, stoically meeting the boy's frustrated gaze as he began to apply a thin sheen of ice along the boy's arm. He's not worth it, Midoriya. The fire and ice user stated once again. Izuku was quiet for a moment before ultimately recalling his flames and letting go of Mainta. He stared down at the boy for a moment before shaking his head with an annoyed growl and leaving the locker room, taking his backpack with him. Thank you, Todoroki. Thank you. The diminutive pervert groveled at the dual hair-colored teen. Todoroki stared down at the boy for a moment before shaking his head and following in Midoriya's footsteps. Don't thank me. Be better. The rest of the boys remained silent at that, not really sure how to react to what had just happened, though they all shared one common thought in their heads. Don't mess with Midoriya. The girls in the locker room slightly jumped as they felt a particularly powerful force slam into the wall. They heard a few voices talking, mumbled as they were, before the other side eventually went quiet. "Whoa," Gyro mumbled with a blush. "Midoriya is kinda scary." "Who? Care to fill us in, Gyro?" Mina asked curiously. "Problem child, Aizawa-sensei." There was a moment's silence following Izuku's acknowledgement of his homeroom teacher. The pro-hero released a tired sigh as he glanced at the clock on his desk. It was well after school hours, nearly an hour and a half or so, before he had been called in by Principal Nezu regarding a minor scuffle between some of his students. He just wanted to go home. It was only the second day. "Tell me, problem child, why did you?" Eraserhead paused for a moment, eyes glancing to the disciplinary report upon his desk. "Slam Minta's head against the wall while using your quirk." Izuku glanced away from his homeroom teacher before sighing quietly. He was trying to peep into the girls' locker room. Aizawa stared down at the fire quirk user for a moment before reaching for his mug of coffee. He sipped on the beverage for a moment, staring down at his student silently. He already knew that. He knew everything about the situation. This was just a formality due to his position as the boys' homeroom teacher. "You're aware that regardless of good intentions or not, quirk usage on classmates and faculty of that magnitude are forbidden and punishable." "Yes." Aizawa droned quietly, not wishing to relay the information but knowing that he needed to do so. "Hi, Aizawa-sensei." Izuku mumbled quietly, staring down at his lap. Aizawa nodded his head before speaking. "This is your first and only warning, Midoriya. There won't be a next time. Do not allow your emotions to control you. They're strong, yes, but they can also ruin your life and the lives of others. Make no mistake though, Minta will receive punishment for this. You on the other hand, are being given a free pass." Midoriya furrowed his eyebrows. "Sensei, UA has a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to sexual harassment. Any and all allegations are taken with the utmost seriousness and are investigated thoroughly. This school is prestigious for many reasons, and the faculty here are promoted to supporting the well-being of their students. Bullying, harassment, sexual or not included, are taken incredibly serious here." I understand, Aizawa-sensei." The teen spoke quietly, bowing his head towards his mentor. "Remember what I told you, Midoriya. If you have issues with your classmates, then I encourage you to come to me with them. I understand how frustrating it can be when witnessing your fellow classmates performing actions that you don't approve of. However, you cannot solve them yourself. It isn't your place to take action. Let us know." "I understand, Aizawa-sensei." Izuku bowed his head once more. "I apologize for causing unnecessary issues. Just don't do it again, problem child." Aizawa spoke tiredly. "Now, go home. We have a big day tomorrow. Make sure to get plenty of rest." The fire quirk user nodded his head, thanked his homeroom teacher and grabbed his backpack while leaving the room. The pro-hero sat quietly as he stared down at the disciplinary form on his desk. He stared down at the parchment for a moment or two before he proceeded to rip the form up, tearing it into tiny pieces and throwing it away in the trash. "You are going to cause me so many headaches, Midoriya." Izuku sighed quietly to himself as he slowly walked through the campus of UA. Why had he gotten so angry at Minta? He had outright assaulted the boy. Sure, the kid was a shameless pervert and kind of annoying, but that didn't mean he deserved to get torched by his quirk. He'd gotten so angry hearing the boy talk about Yaoyorozu and Mina like that. Yes, they were pretty, but they weren't objects. That was incredibly demeaning to them on a humane level. It showed that Minta possessed a lack of maturity and care for others, especially those of the female gender. Midoriya sucked his teeth in annoyance. He could feel his flames itching beneath his skin, wanting to release and burn. No. He needed to be calm. Like Aizawa-sensei had said, he needed to control his emotions. "Did you get in trouble?" Midoriya physically jumped at the voice, having not expected it in the slightest. His head snapped towards the voice, recognizing the person who it belonged to. "See Todoroki," he exclaimed in surprise, trying to calm his rapidly beating heart. What are you still doing here?" The scarred teen blinked at the question. "Any excuse that allows me to stay away from home, I'll take," he explained shortly. "Did you get in trouble?" Midoriya shook his head as he spoke. "No, just a warning." The dual hair-colored teen merely nodded his head at the answer, somewhat expecting it considering the things his father told him about the school. "Why did you stop me, Todoroki-san?" The fire and ice quirk user was silent for a moment, debating what he wished to say. As he spoke, he began to walk towards the security gate with Izuku following after him. "I recognize that look in your eye." Todoroki spoke simply. "Nothing good ever comes from it." Izuku was quiet before staring at the palm of his right hand. I don't know what happened. I just got so angry. Todoroki merely shrugged his shoulders. It's a natural response. Mine too was trying to look at your girlfriend. No one can blame you for getting angry. Izuku nearly tripped at the boy's words. Girlfriend? Yaoyorozu. Wait. Izuku spoke with a huge blush, frantically waving his arms back and forth. Why Yaoyorozu-san and I aren't? We aren't dating. The fire and ice user glanced at Midoriya with a slightly confused expression. Oh, I apologize. I thought you two were romantically involved. We're just friends. Izuku insisted nervously. I understand. Todoroki mumbled quietly. Then you must be with Ishido. Once again, Izuku nearly tripped at the boy's insinuation. No, not Ishido either. Todoroki-san. Not Ishido-san either. Just friends. He corrected one again. Todoroki glanced towards Izuku with a confused expression. Then, Gyro, he proposed. Friends? Izuku squeaked with a blush. The dual hair-colored teen was silent for a moment before making a quiet humming noise. It appears I have misread the situation. Do you only wish to be friends with them? Or do you want to date them? Todoroki-san. Izuku cried out in shock, cheeks practically blazing like the quirk he wielded. What are you even saying? Todoroki himself just seemed confused at Midoriya's shock. What? Am I wrong? I was under the assumption that you were interested in them. Them, as in, multiple, like multiple girlfriends. What are you even suggesting? Todoroki-san. Todoroki shrugged his shoulders. You can have multiple girlfriends, can't you? What's wrong with that? Is there some kind of law stating otherwise? Well, no, there wasn't a law preventing the act of having multiple partners, but it was more so the ethicality of it. Or rather, the morality of said subject. Well, Izuku wouldn't necessarily mind having a girlfriend. Emphasis on a girlfriend. Singular, one, but having multiple. He couldn't even fathom how that'd work. On top of the fact that Todoroki was suggesting that he could have Yaoyorozu, Ishido, and Gyro as girlfriends. Well, it would be nice. Izuku rapidly shook his head to clear of his thoughts about that subject. Well, there's nothing preventing someone from having multiple partners, but there's other stipulations and circumstances that goes into something like that. Moral and ethical beliefs notwithstanding. He explained with a mumble. Todoroki merely shrugged his shoulders. I don't see the big issue. If you like multiple people, what is the issue with pursuing them? Midoriya mumbled to himself, rubbing his cheeks as he thought about how to answer his classmates. It didn't appear that Todoroki was messing around with him. The fire and ice user was relatively blunt all things considered, and he had a very stoic personality. Jokes and pranks didn't really fit his forte. Well, it's not that there are really issues with the idea of doing so, but it's complicated. Most people today are very traditional. They want to find love with one person. He explained as best as he could with the limited knowledge he possessed. Todoroki tilted his head at the answer. Why limit yourself to only one partner? Limit yourself? Was this like a competition to Todoroki? Izuku wanted to laugh at the incredulity of it all. They're not limiting themselves, Todoroki-san. It's just, polyamory isn't something that's very popular these days. It doesn't help that all parties involved have to come to a compromise. Emotions can be volatile, and when it comes to love, well, it's probably the most unpredictable one. The scarred teen nodded his head at Izuku's words. Interesting. Do you have more than two parents, Midoriya? What? More than two? Ew. Well, no. Izuku mumbled while scratching at the back of his neck. I have a mother and a father, but, well, they're divorced. I live alone with my mom. I apologize if I brought up negative memories. The stoic teen apologized, bowing his head. When Izuku nervously waved him off, Todoroki continued. I do. Midoriya blinked at the question before furrowing his eyebrows. You have multiple parents. Todoroki offered a simple nod. I have one father and three mothers. Endeavor had multiple wives. Since when? How had this knowledge not been public? What? Izuku was completely floored. Endeavor has 3 wives. The fire quirk user exclaimed in shock. Todoroki merely nodded once more. How is that? How did he manage to keep this a secret? Todoroki merely shrugged his shoulders. He has a good PR team. That or my mothers are good at hiding. Izuku just couldn't believe what he was hearing. It just didn't seem to make sense at all. Why would Endeavor have 3 wives in the first place? Did he love all 3 of them equally? How could you love all 3 equally? That is, wow. Izuku merely mumbled, shell-shocked at the discovery. The 2 teens then descended into silence, walking side by side as they finally neared the security gate. They were nearly about to reach it before witnessing a peculiar interaction. Yaoyorozu was talking to an incredibly tall and slender man with blonde hair. The guy looked like he was skin and bones, as if a simple breeze would roll him over. Yaoyorozu-san. Izuku called out curiously, surprised to see the girl physically jump in surprise. She whirled on her heels, eyes widening to saucers as she stared at her two classmates. "Why, you okay?" he asked in concern at her reaction. The creation quirk user stammered for a few seconds as she clasped her hands behind her back. "Why, yes, of course. Why wouldn't I be? I'm fine, very fine. Smooth." Toshinori Yagi mentally mused, merely smirking as his protege made a fool of herself. He coughed to compose himself, spewing blood as he did so. He ignored the concerned gazes from the two boys before speaking. "Greetings, young ones. I assume you are classmates of young Yaoyorozu-chan." The two boys nodded their head at the question, watching as their female classmate began to calm down and compose herself. "Haha." The frail man laughed as he placed a gentle hand atop Momo's shoulder. "It is always nice to see such young ones caring for the well-being of their classmates and friends. Well, I'll be on my way then. I was merely wishing luck to young Yaoyorozu-chan and her future as a hero. She has great potential." The girl blushed at the man's praise. "Goodbye, young men." The blonde man smiled as he began to walk away, leaving the teens alone with one another. Todoroki merely offered the man a single nod as he departed. Izuku, on the other hand, he seemed so familiar. Izuku mumbled with furrowed brows, wondering why that strange man was so familiar. "It's like I know him." His words only caused Yaoyorozu to grow nervous. "So, why are you two still here? I thought you'd have both been gone by now," Yaoyorozu asked as she tried to calm her raging heart. Izuku glanced at Todoroki for a moment, blushing in embarrassment at the questions he'd been asked earlier. Well, I had to have a talk with Aizawa-sensei about earlier today. Todoroki was just waiting for me, I guess." The scarred teen merely offered a nod at the boy's words. "So, who was that, Yaoyorozu-san? You seemed very close with him." Yaoyorozu sported a dash of pink on her cheeks as she clasped her hands behind her back. "That was Toshinori Yagi. He's a mentor of mine. I met him several years ago before middle school, and was in need of guidance with my quirk. Yagi-san has been my mentor ever since." Izuku donned a small smile at the girl's words. It seemed Yaoyorozu was very fond of Yagi. Considering he's been her mentor for the past 4 years must have meant that the man was extremely good at his job. "That's nice, Yaoyorozu-san," Izuku complimented with a smile. "I appreciate your words, Midoriya-san," she replied with a small smile. "Yaoyorozu, I want to apologize." Todoroki suddenly spoke, bringing attention to himself. When Yaoyorozu gave him a curious glance, he continued, "I thought that you and Midoriya were dating and made assumptions. I apologize." Both Izuku and Yaoyorozu proceeded to blush at the boy's words. "Todoroki-san," Izuku hissed in embarrassment as he covered his face while shaking his head. "The boyfriend," the curvy girl squeaked. "Midoriya-san and I." Her cheeks somehow got even redder as she placed her hands upon her cheeks, shaking her head side to side in embarrassment. Todoroki merely blinked at the reactions of the two teens. "What? Was it something I said?" Izuku idly scrolled through his phone on his morning commute to UA High. He had received a few compliments from some people regarding his school, and it had left him feeling all warm inside. Embarrassed as well, but warm. He then stepped off the train where he coincidentally met up with one of his other classmates, one that he didn't really know all too well. "Midoriya-san." A round-faced girl waved as she spotted him, picking up her pace to catch up with the boy. The green-haired fire user turned around, spotting the girl calling his name and slowing to a stop. He tried to curb his nervousness, greeting her as she finally caught up. "You're Uraraka-san, right?" Izuku questioned with a nervous smile. The girl offered the boy a polite nod as she responded. "Hi, and you're Izuku Midoriya, right?" The nervous boy granted the girl a small nod, smiling in amusement as she pumped her fist. "You fought against that loud guy who could make explosions, right? Bakugo or something?" she asked curiously. Izuku's smile became decidedly more strained, but he nodded all the same. "Correct." Uraraka was slightly oblivious to the boy's strained smile. "Yeah, that guy's really loud. And rude." She placed an index finger on her cheek as she pursed her lips. "Come to think about it, it's kinda fitting really. What with his quirk and all." Izuku merely offered a simple nod of the head. "I agree." The bubbly girl glanced towards the normally nervous boy before grimacing. "Oh, I forgot you two have bad history." Izuku merely sighed quietly as he shook his head. "Can't really keep it a secret anymore." "Yeah, we weren't friends." Uraraka nodded her head with a frown. "He kept calling you something, Deku, or something like that." "What does that mean?" The green-haired teen rolled his eyes. "It means useless. He gave me that nickname when we were kids growing up because he refused to accept my help when he needed it." The girl frowned at his words. Sounds like a bully. That's because he is, Izuku muttered quietly. Dang, the girl mumbled as she glanced towards the green-haired boy. I'm sorry for bringing it up. It's fine. Izuku waved off the girl's apology with ease. Just going to have to get used to it. Bakugo and I don't like each other and it isn't really a secret. However, like I said yesterday, I'm done putting up with Bakugo's crap. He needs to grow up. If he wants to spend his hero training trying to bring me down, then so be it. It's not going to work. My dream is bigger than him. Uraraka grinned at the boy as she replied. That's the spirit. The normally nervous teen offered the girl a timid smile. Went off on a rant there, huh? You do seem to like your speeches. She responded with a giggle. Izuku gave a soft chuckle at the girl's words before abruptly slowing down and staring at the spectacle occurring in front of UA High. There seemed to be dozens of news reporters and journalists hounding the security gate. Whoa, Uraraka mumbled as she stared at the large crowd. Why are there so many reporters? Probably because of All Might. Izuku mumbled as he continued towards the school. All Might doesn't do interviews anymore. It's actually pretty rare to see him out and about these days. As the two teens got closer, they were immediately hounded by the reporters. Dozens of questions assaulted them, most of which centered around All Might and if they were being taught by him. We're just general ed students, Uraraka mumbled, swerving her way through the journalists and reporters. I haven't even seen All Might. She wasn't really convincing, but at least it kept the hounds at bay, allowing Izuku to coast alongside her into the school. As the teens stepped through the gates, one of the reporters tried to follow. Before the man could even step his foot through, a loud alarm began to blare before the security gates slammed shut, preventing access into the school. Wow, that was awful, Uraraka mumbled as she continued walking alongside Midoriya. The boy merely nodded his head at her words, remaining silent. Uraraka was about to speak once more before being cut off by a familiar voice. Midori-kun, Ashido yelled out, arms waving frantically with a large grin as she made her way towards their direction, practically sprinting towards them. Her boisterous cry caused a small, but embarrassed smile to form on Izuku's face. He waved back at the girl who showed no signs of stopping. Ashido-san. Hey, how are you? Izuku greeted before being practically bowled over by the girl. He landed on the ground with quiet oomph, feeling a weight upon his lap. Midori-kun, Ashido yelled out once more, staring down at the teen without a care in the world. What you up to? She asked with a large grin. From his position on the floor, Izuku blushed a deep red. Well, I'm currently on the floor. His words caused the pink-skinned girl to giggle. Why did you jump on me, Ashido-san? Is there something wrong with jumping on your friends? She asked with an innocent smile. There is when you're wearing a skirt. Izuku mumbled in an embarrassed manner. The boisterous girl glanced down at the position she was in before tilting her head. Embarrassed you'll see something you like, she teased with a giggle. It had the intended effect on Izuku, which only made Mina laugh harder. She jumped back to her feet before offering her hand to Midoriya with a smile. The boy accepted it with an embarrassed smile, cheeks blazing. Uraraka, right? Mina asked as she turned her attention towards the gravity manipulator. Why, yeah. And you're Ashido, right? Mina merely nodded her head, clashing her hands behind her back with a small smile. It was not a nice smile. What you doing with Midori-kun? Uraraka blinked at the, in her opinion, odd question. Why did Mina's smile seem fake? It was almost as if the girl was slightly annoyed. Well, I saw him getting off his train and decided to talk with him on our way to school, she answered, slightly taken aback by the feeling she was getting from Mina. She was feeling slightly uncomfortable and couldn't really explain why. The acid-flinging quirk user nodded her head before turning towards Izuku and speaking. Adorable. That single word somehow made Uraraka even more uncomfortable. What the heck was going on? We should get going, Izuku offered nervously, spotting Gyro and Yaoyorozu waving their way a few meters up ahead. Come on, Ashido-san. He turned towards Uraraka before offering her a small smile. It was nice meeting you, Uraraka-san. After his words, the boy began to walk away, intending on greeting Yaoyorozu and Gyro. Mina allowed the boy to walk ahead of her before turning her attention on Uraraka. The girl's eyes seemed to flash dangerously, and her boisterous smile flattened, lips thinning into a fine line. Adorable, Mina said once more, staring directly into Uraraka's eyes. Just adorable. Then she was off, skipping merrily towards her friend group while calling out their names with a large smile. Uraraka did not enjoy what had just happened. In fact, she didn't even know what had happened. Why did Mina seem so hostile? The girl was usually so joyful and carefree. What did she do? Before we do anything today, Aizawa droned on tiredly, practically falling over his desk due to his sleepiness. You'll be picking a class representative and a vice president. Why? Because for future events and scenarios where you're lacking the guidance of a teacher, your class representative will be the one you go to. In the event that your class representative is out of commission for whatever reason, then the vice president will be the one you go to. Now, in the case of extreme emergencies, a third individual can be chosen in case there's ever a time where both the class rep and the vice president are both unable to attend to the class needs. But we'll worry about that if it ever actually happens. So, go ahead and select your 2 representatives. The classroom then erupted into semi-controlled chaos with most of the students boisterously declaring their wishes of being the class representative. Izuku merely allowed the class to bicker with one another about who had the necessary qualifications of being fit for leadership. He sneaked a glimpse at Yaoyorozu, watching as the girl mimicked his own actions. She herself didn't seem to be too interested in the discourse, but it was clear that she was listening to the class. Eventually, something had to give. Would it not make the most sense to pick our representative based off the qualities that a pro-hero embodies? Todoroki finally questioned, slicing through the chattering of his classmates. We should vote democratically. Izuku smiled at Todoroki's words. I agree with Todoroki-san. We should all write down who we believe embodies what it means to be a true hero and go on from there. However, no voting for yourself. That'd be unfair and it'll only bloat the voting pool. Nina pointed towards her friend as she spoke. Midori-kun's got the right idea. And so, everyone went on to write who they believed to embody a true pro-hero. The results were, not surprising, well, at least to the entire class aside from one person. That person being Izuku himself. 11 votes. He squawked in disbelief. More than half of you voted for me. Yaoyorozu spoke up with a smile, amused at her friend's surprise. It makes sense. Your speech the other day was very genuine and earnest. Even All Might himself acknowledged your words. And then your fight with Bakugo-san. I think everyone here believes you're more than qualified. Or well, at least most of us. She mumbled while rolling her eyes, knowing that Bakugo himself was the sole exception, and possibly minded due to what had happened between them. Izuku stared at the results, still surprised to see he had been voted for by over half the class. Yaoyorozu herself got 5 votes, Ida got 3 votes and Bakugo had 1 vote. The result made him roll his eyes. He more than likely still voted for himself. As if anyone believed that Bakugo embodied what a true hero was. Well, guess I'm the class representative. Izuku muttered with a nervous smile. I appreciate the votes. Now that that's settled, please avoid bothering me and do whatever it is that you kids do when alone. Aizawa spoke from his position on the floor, rolled up in his sleeping bag. Except for having sex. No sex allowed. He closed his eyes with a smirk, listening to some of the students squawk in embarrassment. Izuku placed his lunch tray down beside Yaoyorozu, taking the seat next to her while greeting her. Hey, Yaoyorozu-san. Midoriya-san. The wealthy girl greeted politely with a smile. How does it feel to be the class rep? A bit of pink dusted his cheeks at her question. Well, I feel honored that my classmates think so highly of me, even after what happened with Montizatiion yesterday. Momo hummed to herself as she began to eat her enormous plate of food. I don't necessarily blame you for your actions. While yes, you could have handled the situation better, I find it incredibly difficult to believe that Montizatiion would learn from just a verbal scolding. I appreciate that you and some of the other boys were willing to stick up for us. It's cool to know that a majority of the guys aren't weirdos like Maita. Gyro piped up with a smile, making herself known as she sat down with her own lunch. Gyro told us everything that happened. Nina followed up, sitting beside the purple-haired girl. I thought it was pretty hot. She winked at the boy following her words, giggling as a fierce blush spread across his features. Come on, dude. Gyro snorted with a smile as she nudged Mina's shoulder, chuckling at Midoriya's embarrassed expression. You're gonna break him again. Yaoyorozu smiled thinly at her friend's words. Adorable. The girl proceeded to then dig into her food, eating at a rapid pace but still somehow managing to convey a sense of dignity and poise. Wow, Yao Momo, Nina mumbled as she stared at the mountain of food on the girl's plate. That's a lot of food. You can keep that down. Where does it even go? Midoriya rose an eyebrow himself at the sheer volume of food on the curvy girl's plate. I'm guessing it has something to do with your quirk. Momo dabbed her face with a napkin, cheeks a light pink as she spoke. You are correct, Midoriya-san. In order for me to utilize my quirk, I need to ingest large amounts of food to function as the battery. In order to create inorganic objects, my quirk uses my lipids and fat cells to create the item, so long as I know the molecular makeup of the item. Mina whistled in appreciation. Smart and gorgeous. Sheesh. Gyro burst out laughing at Mina's words. You did not just sheesh. How old are you? 52. Mina giggled at the girl's words. Sheesh. The girl even went so far as to place her index and middle finger upon her wrist, checking herself for a pulse while biting her bottom lip. Izuku and Momo giggled at the girl's goofy expression as Mina and Gyro began to laugh loudly. Out of nowhere, an alarm started blaring loudly, shocking the group and causing no small amount of chaos to ensue. What's going on? Mina asked frantically, watching as random students ran and panicked. The syllabus mentioned that alarms only go off inside the school if the perimeter's been breached. Izuku responded, yelling to be heard over the chaos. Come on, we need to get to our designated evacuation area. The three girls all followed after Midoriya, getting pushed around and shoved as they tried to evacuate from the cafeteria. In the midst of all the chaos, Gyro was separated from the group, getting boxed against a window and crying out in pain. The girl clenched her earphone jacks, gritting her teeth as all the yelling was causing her ears to overstimulate. She peeked an eye open, managing to catch a glimpse of the front gate before widening her eyes. It was the stupid reporters and journalists. They had managed to somehow get through. Gyro elbowed someone who pushed her against the window before trying to spot any of her friends. She managed to catch a glimpse of Uraraka, who was relatively close to her, before using her earphone jacks to grab a hold of the girl's wrist. The girl immediately rounded on the sensation, spotting the familiar earlobe quirk before pushing and shoving her way to the girl. Gyro-san, are you okay? She yelled, as she noticed the girl clenching her earphone jacks tightly. It's loud, she cried in pain. We need to let them know it isn't serious. It's just the reporters from outside. Uraraka managed to catch a glimpse of the intruders before immediately touching her fingertips and floating upwards into the air. She desperately searched for one of her classmates, knowing that her voice alone wouldn't be enough to corral the crowd. Her eyes quickly spotted a head of messy green locks before she made her way over towards Izuku, catching his gaze quickly. He rose his hand into the air, seemingly aware of what she wanted to do. She touched the boy's hand a moment later, causing him to slowly float in the air. Izuku immediately began to channel his quirk, allowing his flames to burst from his palms, spiraling around him like a tornado. Hey, stop panicking. The boy roared loudly, channeling his flames and causing them to bellow outwards. The UA students began to slowly calm down at the sight, finally allowing for some much-needed silence. It's just the reporters from outside. They managed to somehow get through the barrier. His face hardened, staring down at the students with disappointment. We're UA high students. Act like it. What's wrong with all of you? Evacuate to your designated zones in an orderly fashion. Now, go. After his words, the students began to slowly and calmly vacate the packed hallway. Izuku himself sighed quietly before snuffing out his flames and looking over at Uraraka. The girl gave him a small smile before touching her fingertips together, causing the two of them to slowly fall back down. Nice work, Midoriya. The girl complimented with a smile. As expected from our class rep. Izuku gave an embarrassed smile at the girl's words. It was nothing. Midori-kun. It was his only warning before barreled over by Mina. This was not the first time, and nor would it be the last time, that Izuku would get jumped on by Mina. Aizawa-sensei. Yes, problem child. Izuku made a face at that before asking his question. Is there a particular reason why we're not going to our foundational hero studies class? And why we're already in our hero costumes? Aizawa sighed to himself as he guided his class. Today's lesson will be a special one. Just follow me and I'll explain it more in detail when we actually get there. Izuku nodded his head, glancing towards his friends and shrugging his shoulders. Their journey was relatively short as they stopped near one of the parking lots. A small bus was parked outside, its doors ajar. All right, get inside. Aizawa ordered simply. Everyone, get on in an orderly fashion. Ida ordered, chopping his arm like a robot. Who died and made you class rep? Mina snorted as she brushed past the prickly teen. Gyro chuckled quietly, following after the pink-skinned girl. Come on man, ease up. It's just a bus ride. She too passed by the boy. Ida frowned at their words as the rest of the class followed their lead, passing by the boy without another word. Izuku merely patted the taller boy's shoulder, consoling the sulking boy without actually speaking. Yaoyorozu giggled at the boy's action as she followed her class rep. When all the students filed on the bus, Aizawa ordered the driver to take off. Izuku sat next to Yaoyorozu, staring out the window in awe at how big UA really was. It was one thing to read about it on the internet, but to see it in person. It was crazy just how much there actually was. It's surreal, isn't it, Midoriya-san? Momo asked with a smile, joining him in gazing out the window. Why, yeah, he answered with a smile. My whole life I dreamt of being a hero to help people. It's surreal that I'm actually here. You deserve to be here, Midoriya-san, Momo stated, drawing the boy's gaze. You embody what a real hero should be. I'm slightly envious sometimes. Izuku noted that the girl seemed troubled, almost as if she was disappointed. But, why? Yaoyorozu wanted to be a hero to help people as well. She had said so herself. She deserved to be here as well. Why would she be envious of him? He wouldn't get his answer as the bus finally came to a stop. Aizawa then woke up from his cat nap, ordering the students off the bus and having them stand near the entrance of a massive building with the letters USJ labeled on it. Universal Studios Japan, Kaminari exclaimed happily, causing Gyro to snort at his stupidity. No, Aizawa said simply, punching in a code that the students couldn't see and opening the massive doors that led into the building. The students were awed at the various terrain and different-looking environments within the gigantic building. Welcome to the unforeseen simulation joint, Aizawa greeted casually. Our first day, we ran multiple different tests in which you were ordered to utilize your quirk to your advantage. The second day, you were all pit against one another in combat, learning how dangerous your quirks can actually be in a combat scenario. Today, we are going to show you how to utilize your quirk for rescue operations. Allow me to take over, Aizawa. A muffled voice spoke out. It's 13. Uraraka gushed at the astronaut-looking pro-hero. You're my favorite hero. The black hole manipulator chuckled in amusement. It seems I have a fan. She chuckled once more before continuing. As Aizawa was explaining, today we are going to be doing mock exercises in which we place all of you in different environments, having you save and provide aid to your fellow classmates. As the students began to murmur between each other excitedly, Aizawa gazed around the area. 13. Where's All Might? The woman held up her hand, signaling with 3 fingers as she spoke. He got caught up with some things. I'm not sure if he'll be here today. The words of the pro-heroes went over a lot of the students' heads. Mainly speaking, everyone. All except for one. Momo frowned at the words, clasping at her forearm nervously. Her eyes scanned over her classmates, spotting their slightly confused expressions. She sighed quietly to herself, staving off the discomfort at knowing that All Might had already used up a majority of his daily limit and power. Well, at least today couldn't get any worse. Aizawa-sensei. What's that? Izuku cried out in alarm, standing against the balcony that overlooked the main plaza. The man raced over to his student, taking note of the boy's concerned tone. His eyes widened dramatically at seeing what appeared to be a portal with several dozens of individuals walking through it. 13. The pro-hero exclaimed, tugging on his capture scarf and pulling his goggles over his eyes. Get the kids out of here. We're under attack by villains. Damn it. She shouldn't have said anything. It just got much worse. As 13 made to open the door to the building, a shadowy mist appeared, blocking her way. Hello, students of UA High. The mist seemed to grow smaller before taking the shape of what appeared to be a man dressed in a suit. The League of Villains is here today with a goal, one that will tear down the foundation of the world as we know it. The students began to group up behind 13 as the villain spread his arms wide. We are here to kill All Might. Momo had never been a confident individual growing up. Sure, she could don a faux persona of an arrogant, wealthy girl, but arrogance and confidence did not go hand in hand. Growing up, she'd lacked belief in herself. How is that possible? She'd wonder, how can this be? She pondered. She grew up wealthy. She never needed to worry about anything. She was blessed with a powerful quirk, taking the best attributes from her parents' power and making it her own. A photographic memory with the ability to create inorganic matter using her lipids as fuel. It was a beauty of a quirk, only truly limited by her incessant need to consume food. But that had changed a few years ago, hadn't it? She had met Toshinori Yagi, only to quickly find out that he was really All Might. Momo had learned some horrific things that day, some things that could cause worldwide panic if handled improperly. For you see, All Might was no longer the indomitable beacon of strength and peace that stopped villains with but a gaze. All Might was weak now. Everyday living was a struggle for the man. He'd fought, quite nearly to the death, with a nemesis believed to be nothing more than a fairy tale. A Bujaman, if you will. However, Momo wished that it was a fable. Someone who possessed enough power to fend off and nearly kill All Might was someone Momo never wished to meet, let alone believe in. But the man was dead. All Might had killed him. There wasn't a threat like that man anymore. However, while that whole tale was disconcerting in itself, the real horror was the instability that All Might's retirement would have on the world. All Might was a force of nature, one that prevented evil and villainy before it could truly even begin. But what would happen when that beacon was no longer lit? Who would become the individual meant to rekindle the flame? Who could bear the weight of the world on their shoulders? Who could become All Might? Unfortunately, she was to become the next beacon. By no means was this a simple task. It was ever looming, always atop her shoulders, weighing her down. It dragged behind her, its weight equivalent to 1 billion men pulling against her with a rope. Momo Yaoyorozu had always lacked confidence, but that chance meeting with All Might, and the discovery that followed, she had begun to slowly change. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't quick, and it sure as hell wasn't easy, but she had slowly grown into herself the longer she spent with Toshinori. Now, was she the most confident individual who believed in their strength and could climb any obstacle with but a mere thought? No, not really. She was still a child. She still had her insecurities, her doubts, and her anxiety. After all, she was supposed to be the next beacon, the next symbol of peace that would save any and everyone while inspiring hope. Or at least, she had originally been led to believe so. After meeting Midoriya, she had begun to doubt herself. Was she truly the one who could handle the burden of being the next symbol of peace? To be the next #1 hero? Was Momo even qualified for something as grandiose as that? Her reasonings for becoming a hero had been shallow. Momo had wanted to be a hero to prove to herself that she was capable of doing so. She wished to separate herself from her family name. She wanted to be someone else. She didn't want to be Yaoyorozu Momo, heiress to the Yaoyorozu family who headed Yaoyorozu Incorporated. She just wanted to be Momo. Helping people and saving them had come after the meeting with All Might. He inspired any and everyone. Kids everywhere looked up to the man. They believed in him. They trusted him. She was just Momo. Who would believe in her? She couldn't even believe in herself. All this training, all this strength, what did it even mean? What did it truly amount to at the end of the day? She was but an insecure girl, wishing to become a hero for selfish desires. She had never believed that she was good enough, never believed she deserved to hold All Might's power. But Midoriya did. He embodied what a true hero was supposed to be. His words had even impressed All Might. What could Momo do against that? How could she argue against that? Had those 3 arduous years with All Might been nothing but a waste? Did her strength truly mean so little? Ideals made lesser men great. What did Momo believe in? A pink glow began to emanate around Momo, causing a thin sheen of energy to twist and wrap around her body, covering her like a blanket. Her spiky hair came unwound from its ponytail, flailing wildly as the unknown pink energy flared around her. These thoughts, nagging and ever persistent, they'd always been there, even before Midoriya came into the picture. She'd always believed herself to be inferior and unworthy. She never could truly accept that she was All Might's apprentice. But maybe, just maybe, her beliefs and thoughts didn't matter. At least for today. She wouldn't allow these thoughts to hamper her. She couldn't afford to. Not when the lives of those around her were potentially at stake. She was going to fight. She didn't need to believe in herself. She only needed to do what was right. Momo closed her eyes as she called upon the power of One for All. It caressed her, whispering sweet nothings and assurances. Her anxiety, her doubts, her insecurities, they vanished, replaced by a serenity that she seldomly experienced. One for All told her she was worthy. One for All believed in her. One for All wanted her to see her shine. One for All supported her. So Momo would believe in it. She'd place her faith and hope in this power, just as All Might had done for her. Momo could distantly hear voices and sounds around her. They were frantic, worried. The very air seemed to quiver, uncomfortably so. She could sense the nervousness around her, the anxiety, the fear of the unknown. But with that uncertainty came forth a wave of determination and hope. It emanated around her, slowly smothering the suffocating anxiety and fear. Everything felt so clear. Momo's eyes snapped open, eyes a brilliant glowing pink. She ignored the cacophony of sounds around her, eyes zeroing in on the black, misty-looking man barring their escape. Move. A familiar stabbing sensation in Momo's brain caused her to move. The world was a blur as she called upon the power wielded by 8 different individuals in history, briefly disappearing from everyone's vision. Nothing mattered. Not today, at least. Momo wouldn't allow her thoughts to hold her back from doing what was right. She needed to be more than just Momo Yaoyorozu. She needed to be a hero. Momo ignored the minor sting in her knuckles as her clenched fist caved in the metal brace surrounding the blackish-purple man. She ignored his pained scream, ignored 13's cry of surprise, and even tuned out the collective shock of her classmates. It didn't matter. Focus. Bending her knees and crouching low, Momo reared her leg back. The muscles in her body abruptly flexed as she pivoted on her heels before kicking towards the villain's direction. A gale force wind emanated from her action, blasting Kurogiri against the giant doors of the USJ building whilst causing the metallic structure to shake at the sheer strength. Pink eyes, hyper-focused on the task at hand, ignored the worried cries from her classmates and teacher as she took on another low stance, shifting most of her weight on her back leg while contorting like a snake. One of her arms rose above her head, bending at the elbow with her palm pacing the sky whilst the other extended forward, palm facing towards the fog-like villain. Assuming her martial arts stance, Momo glared at the villain who was struggling to remove himself from the metallic hole she forced him into. A bright pink glow shone from Momo's stomach before a slender and wooden-like staff emerged from her flesh. The girl pulled the long weapon out, twirling the weapon between her hands before crouching low once more whilst shouldering the staff along the back of her shoulders. "You are not normal," the fog-like villain spoke slowly, glowing yellow eyes staring at her like an actual threat. "We can't have that, now can we?" A stabbing sensation pricked at Momo once more, hinting at the danger to come. Momo's muscles flexed as she kicked off from her position, cratering the earth with her strength. With nary more than a brief feeling of satisfaction, Momo reached the fog-like villain once more before swinging her staff towards Kurogiri's body. To her immense surprise and shock, her staff seemed to just float through his body, smashing against the giant walls she had nearly sent him through. Clang! The doors to the USJ building were blown off due to the strength and force from Momo's attack. An immense shockwave shot through the building, forcing her teacher and fellow classmates back. Momo's staff was practically eviscerated as it smashed against the now open doors, leaving her open for but a moment. "Got you now," the villain spoke in a sinister tone. Another stabbing sensation pricked at her head before the man had even begun to speak. She didn't know what the man was trying to do, but she was certain it had something to do with teleportation at the very least. It was what he had showcased, briefly. Momo's pink eyes flicked up to the dented neck brace upon the man's body, the only actual object present on the man. Her staff had went through his body, but her punch had certainly damaged the item around his neck. Ah, of course. His misty appearance wasn't just for show then. His entire body was the mist, which meant Momo ignored the pervading darkness that began to envelop her. Instead, she shifted on the balls of her heels, chambering her fist to her ribs. "Take this," Momo screamed as her fist shot towards the brace along the man's neck. She heard the crunch of metal, felt the material warp and bend around her fist. She took immense satisfaction in the way he cried out in pain before gritting her teeth as the darkness finally surrounded her. The last thing her pink eyes managed to see before being forcefully teleported away was Midoriya. His eyes were widened in fear and surprise, causing her stomach to churn. She distantly heard him scream something before a sea of flames careened towards her, intent on trying to rescue her. "Good luck, Midoriya-san." She offered the boy a small smile before being swallowed by the man's quirk, disappearing from sight. "Yororocu," Midoriya screamed as he sent forth an immense wave of flames towards the misty villain. His stomach dropped at the look in her eyes as she was enveloped by the blackish fog. His flames slammed into Kurogiri a moment later, causing the man to grunt quietly as he was buffeted against the door. The villain seemed to warble for a moment, almost struggling to move due to the damage done by Momo. Before he could warp himself to safety, a blast of ice raced towards his body, crashing against his fog-like body while entrapping him against the destroyed wall of the USJ. An ear-piercing explosion and scream followed directly after the wave of ice. "Die!" A manic blonde teen rocketed through the air before landing atop the wall of ice and trapping the villain. Small crackles barked against Bakugo's hand as he held it over Kurogiri's neck brace. "Move. I'll blast you, damn it." The boy smiled in a feral manner, red eyes beaming in glee at the prospect of causing pain to the villain. "Bakugo, move," Midoriya cried out, noticing the man's mist seeping through Todoroki's ice. He placed his hands behind his body before jettisoning flames behind him, propelling him towards his old bully. "Midoriya," Todoroki responded as he followed after the boy, shooting ice on the floor and skating alongside the boy. Bakugo's eyes glanced towards their way for a moment before widening upon noticing the blackish-purple mist spring up around him. The explosive teen grit his teeth angrily before staring down at Kurogiri. A wild grin formed on his face a moment later before his palms barked loudly. Before being engulfed by the villain's quirk, Bakugo released an immense explosion directly atop the villain. "Die!" he screamed before being abducted by the fog. "Bakugo!" Midoriya screamed, watching as the boy was whisked away. A fierce snarl tore through his lips upon noticing the man writhing along the floor. His fog-like body warbled in unnatural ways due to the damage done to his neck brace. Midoriya flicked his gaze towards Todoroki before nodding his head. "Target the brace. Every time it's been hit, his body takes damage." Todoroki nodded his head before creating a ramp with his ice and skating off of it, shooting into the air. "I'll distract him," The fire ice user climbed through the sky before twisting his body and pointing his left hand towards the downed villain. I dislike having to use my left side, but now isn't the time for personal grievances. Take this. With a roar, Todoroki released an immense wave of fire from the palm of his hand. As he began to descend, the boy proceeded to rapidly spin, causing his flames to spiral like a tornado. Midoriya raced behind the boy's flames, using the attack as a curtain to shield himself. "That won't work on me," the fog-like villain yelled as his body seemed to warp and stretch. He warbled for several moments, body spazzing and shaking, but was eventually successful in his endeavor. The man swept his arm, conjuring a black wall that seemed to swallow the tornado of fire. Kirigiri smirked to himself, snuffing out the boy's flames. "Is that all, yo? Burner finger 1. Midoriya roared while pointing his index finger towards Kirigiri. The villain cried out in pain as a narrow stream of fire pierced through his neck brace, melting the item. Kirigiri screamed in agony at the attack before being swallowed by a sea of flames a moment later. "Todoroki-kun," Midoriya shouted as he continued to propel himself forward. "Use your ice when I tell you." The boy, still in his free fall, merely nodded his head before mimicking Izuku. He placed his hands behind him before forcing both his fire and ice out his palms. His free fall was reduced immensely as he shifted his body in the air. Placing his hand below him, he created a ramp of ice, sliding down it and continuing towards Kirigiri whilst waiting for Midoriya's signal. Izuku glared at Kirigiri's flailing body before twisting his body and spinning while jettisoning flames out behind him. He began to spin so fast that his form became encased in a ball of fire, shining brightly while rapidly increasing his speed. Before reaching Kirigiri, Midoriya screamed for Todoroki to shoot forth his ice. The dual-haired teen said nothing as he grit his teeth while sliding atop his ice. While sliding forward, an immense wave of ice shot forth from his feet towards Kirigiri, flash freezing the ground. Heaven-piercing ice wall. The ice then proceeded to splinter outward, growing nearly 10 times its original size before piercing through Kirigiri's shadowy body, swallowing him whole. Midoriya channeled his quirk a moment later, gathering the excess flames circling his body while maintaining his spiral ascent. Before reaching the climax of his ascent, the boy halted abruptly, shooting forth his right hand while allowing his flames to carry their original momentum. Hisco Hellfire Bomb. As Izuku guided the flames towards Kirigiri's entrapped body, he proceeded to feed more flames into the spinning ball of fire. With nary more than a thought, the boy allowed the colossal ball of fire to shoot down into Todoroki's avalanche of ice. An immense flash of white light engulfed the top balcony, absolutely shaking the building while causing an immense cloud of steam to shoot through the sky, spreading out and nearly blanketing the entirety of the USJ building. Momo grit her teeth, eyes rapidly flicking around. She felt vertigo assault her body before flicking her gaze below her. Her eyes widened upon noticing that she was nearly 50 feet in the air, falling down in a random section of the USJ building. Her pink eyes flicked around for several moments before her stomach glowed a bright pink. A backpack-like item formed from her stomach before the girl placed the item on. She pulled on the parachute's cord, halting her abrupt momentum whilst allowing her to float down. Her gaze snapped towards the entrance of the building, spotting an abrupt explosion. Following that explosion was a sea of flames and wall of ice, both seemingly working around one another. A small smile came to her face before opening wide upon noticing the ice and fire detonate against one another, causing a blinding flash of light. "Geez," Momo spoke to herself, still slowly falling. "Those two work together pretty well. There she is." Momo flicked her gaze downwards, spotting nearly 24 men and women below her. A frown formed on her face as she noticed their unique appearances and clothes. Wait. Her eyes snapped back towards the entrance before she grit her teeth. That villain. He had the ability to teleport people using his body. He was going to send all of the students to these isolated areas, allowing these villains to potentially. She shook her head at the thought. No, this was a coordinated attack. That villain had said that they were here to kill All Might, which meant they possessed something capable of killing All Might. Dread surged through her veins at the thought. All Might wasn't in his prime, but to believe they could successfully kill him. Momo's gaze flicked down towards the villains below her before her face contorted angrily. She needed to get back to her classmates. She needed to warn them. The spiky-haired girl grit her teeth before creating a knife, a karambit specifically. She spun the blade around her index finger, twirling it before palming it. Slicing through the cord attached to her parachute, she flung the bag off before spinning her body and facing towards the ground. Chambering her free hand to her chest, the curvy girl waited until she was 10 feet above the ground. With a grunt of effort, the girl punched down toward the earth, creating an immense shockwave that slowed her descent while simultaneously knocking all of the villains away from her, even managing to knock some of the weaker ones out. Upon landing on the ground, her pink eyes flicked around rapidly, spotting a few of the villains running towards her. She sucked her teeth as she dodged an attack from a vine-like quirk. She immediately latched onto the object, pulling the individual towards her. The unknown man released a cry of surprise as he was pulled off his feet by the young girl. He was completely unprepared for the fist that caved in his skull, knocking him out instantly. Momo took a calming breath before clenching her fist around the man's vine-like quirk. She watched as the remaining villains began to slowly surround her, now incredibly wary of her strength. The Yua teen glanced at the men and women, breathing heavily as adrenaline continued to surge through her body. Abruptly, another explosion drew her attention as she gazed towards the entrance of the USJ. Move. That same stabbing sensation occurred, causing Momo to bend her back at an unnatural angle. A metal saw-like object sailed directly over her, causing her to grit her teeth. I don't have time for this. A pink glow emanated from her bicep before Momo reached for the object. The girl turned her heads towards the item before using her teeth to snag the pin out the flashbang she created. She dropped the item at her feet, closing her eyes and ignoring the shrill sound that followed. Hearing the surprised cries from the men and women around her, she proceeded to blitz through the villains. Her form was a blur as she slammed each and every villain into the ground, knocking them out with her enhanced strength. Noticing that one of the men, one who was made of some kind of metal, groaned painfully. Momo sped towards the man before lifting her foot into the air and bringing it down into the man's chest, spearing him nearly 3 meters into the ground with her increased strength. She ignored his agonizing scream before turning towards the entrance of the USJ building and racing towards it. Just hold on. A little longer. I'm coming. Aizawa grunted as he flipped and twirled, legs striking out against a random villain and knocking the man out. He spun on his heels, capture scarf shooting out behind him to ensnare a random woman by her neck before flinging her away. He blocked a punch from behind, twisting around while dropping low, sweeping the man and grabbing him by his shirt. He grunted quietly, spearing the man's head directly onto the pavement. He ignored the now unconscious man, spinning away from a random villain with a mutation quirk before using his capture scarf to bind the man's arms. Tugging on the item, Eraserhead forced the man towards him before close-lining the man. Upon knocking the man to the ground, his foot rose before stomping on the man's skull, knocking him out. His eyes flicked rapidly around, keeping the unique bird creature and the man with multiple hands on his body in his line of sight. He could sense the danger those two were putting off, knowing they were cut from a different cloth than these cheap 2-bit lackeys. Aizawa leaped straight into the air, dodging a dual-pronged attack from 2 random men. The 2 men crashed into one another before the pro hero performed a split kick, knocking both men out at the same time. Coming down from his attack, Eraserhead weaved his body around a man with a blade for an arm. He deflected the man twice before abruptly stepping into the man, shoulder checking him before grabbing on the man's arm and judo flipping him over his shoulder. Aizawa stomped on the man's head a moment later, before ducking his head away from a woman with a chainsaw for a head. "You are so ugly," he mumbled quietly, ignoring her rage-filled screech. He flicked his capture scarf towards her, allowing the item to wrap around her leg. He tugged on the item, causing the woman to lose her footing. Spinning on his heels, Aizawa used the woman as a makeshift bat, knocking out and bashing her against various other villains. The pro hero abruptly released the woman, causing her to be sent flying into another group of villains. He wiped off a bead of sweat, grimacing to himself. "At this rate, I won't be able to deal with those two. There's still so many of these small fry." He grit his teeth, twirling and flipping away from some villains who were using long-range attacks. His hair flared up as he nullified their quirks before taking advantage of their confusion. An abrupt explosion caused him to stumble as he forced his gaze back towards the entrance. His eyes widened before an immense wave of heat and bone-chilling breeze assaulted the building. Not a moment later did an explosion rack the entire building, blinding some of the villains who were closer to the 2 main villains in the back. Eraserhead grit his teeth before grunting in pain as a cannon of water slammed into him. He spun several times on the floor before pushing off the ground and using his capture scarf to ensnare a random villain. He tugged downward, slamming the man's head into the cement. He slowly stood to his feet, wiping off the growing sweat on his face. He released a tired breath, staring at the near 30 remaining villains with a grimace. He grit his teeth, noticing the multiple-hand guy now walking towards him. "You really are cool, Eraserhead." The shaggy-haired man spoke manically. He released a wicked laugh before shooting towards the quirk-nullifying man. Aizawa grit his teeth, dodging the initial swipe from the man before lashing out with a right jab. His fist cracked against the man's jaw, causing him to release a howl of pain. Twisting on his feet, Aizawa reared his right hand back before backhanding the shaggy teen. The bluish-haired man rolled along the floor several times before abruptly stopping, staring at Aizawa with menacing glowing eyes. "You're so good. Ha 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 ha. You really are a main character, aren't you?" Aizawa sucked his teeth, eyes darting around as he spotted various villains surrounding him. The random men and women managed to distract him for a moment. It was all the multiple-hand man needed. "Pay attention, Eraserhead," the shaggy-haired man cried as his fist cracked against the side of Aizawa's head. The pro-hero rolled with the punch, lashing out with a knee against the man's stomach. The villain released a wheezing breath of pain before folding over pro-hero's knee. Aizawa raised his elbow into the air before bringing it down upon the man's neck. Before Aizawa could further capitalize on the downed man, the villain's hand wrapped itself around his ankle. Aizawa's eyes widened as a burning pain seared through his ankle. Twisting his heel, the pro-hero's other foot cracked out against the man's face, causing his ankle to be released. Aizawa watched as the man tumbled along the cement before glancing down at his ankle. His eyes widened upon noticing the damage done to his ankle. The skin around his ankle had been practically grated to nothing, revealing the muscle of his ankle. What kind of quirk? Ha ha ha. The hand-faced villain laughed as he slowly stood to his feet, wiping off the bit of blood dribbling from his mouth. "You're something else, but I'm getting bored of this single-player game. Where's All Might?" Aizawa scoffed as he shifted his stance, limping a bit due to his injury. "He's not here. You wasted your time coming here." The man paused for a moment before his right hand came up to his neck, scratching at the exposed flesh. "Then I'll force him to treat this as a main story mission. I'll start by killing off your students." The insane man turned towards the hulking beast before speaking. "Namu, take down Eraserhead." Aizawa was woefully unprepared for the sheer speed at which this hulking monstrosity moved. His eyes widened to an insane degree before he was physically folded over the beast's fist. His ribs creaked ominously before he was sent careening through the plaza, crashing into a random bench before ultimately slamming into a metal rail guard. Aizawa was somehow still semi-conscious after that vicious attack. His vision blurred as he stared up at the roof of the building. Black splotches filled his vision before he saw 3 separate fists coming down towards his face, intent on turning his head into paste. The pro-hero slowly closed his eyes, accepting his inevitable death with open arms. He had lived his life with no regrets. Up until this very point at least. He'd die with the knowledge that he was unable to protect the lives of his students. That would be his only regret. An immense wave of heat sailed over his body, covering his entire visage and causing him to grimace at the sheer heat the flames were producing. Despite his concussed state, Aizawa knew exactly who that was. He shouldn't be here. He was going to get himself killed. He opened his mouth to speak before a wave of cold air crashed down in front of him, causing his bones to ache due to the incredibly low temperature of the ice. No, they needed to leave. They shouldn't be here. They were going to get themselves killed. A moment later, a pair of worried green eyes stared down into his. His vision spun as he stared at 3 separate Midoriyas, each hovering over him. "Sensei, we're gonna get you out of here. We managed to get someone to call for the heroes." Izuku spoke frantically, hands prodding his body for any major signs of serious injuries. "Shoji, help me get him to his feet. Sato, you and Shoji get him out of here." Vertigo racked Aizawa, causing a wave of nausea to assault him. He felt several hands glide along his body as he was physically lifted off the ground before suddenly being moved. He could hear several explosions emanating around him whilst feeling varying degrees of heat and ice. The distinct smell of sulfur nearly caused him to retch and he almost vomited as several powerful vibrations shook the plaza. These were his students' quirks. They needed. "Or run," Aizawa hoarsely cried, head lolling to the side as he leaned against Shoji. "Get out." "No can do, sensei," Shoji interrupted, ignoring the vicious shakes and trembles assaulting the plaza around them. "We can't leave you behind," Sato supported, hefting most of the man's weight. A vicious quake nearly caused the 3 men to trip as ash and cinder slowly fell from the sky, followed by another wave of cold air. They felt the temperature abruptly shift before another massive quake slammed into the plaza, shaking the foundation of the USJ building. That was the last thing Aizawa felt before abruptly passing out, dozing in and out as his 2 students forced him to stay awake. Nothing's working, Midoriya, Todoroki yelled as he skated around the hulking beast, hell-bent on making its way toward their teacher. It just keeps moving. It's like it has multiple quirks. Midoriya rose into the sky, staying afloat with his flames as he stared down at the genetically modified creature. Green eyes flicked about, spotting various other villains trying to aid the creature only to get beat back his various other classmates. Analytical mind working a mile a minute, Izuku closed his eyes briefly, trying to come up with a plan. Genetic creature, modified body, enhanced strength, enhanced speed, regeneration, exposed brain, potential weakness. Physical attacks don't seem to work and not keen on trying to get close. One-track mind, intellectual levels potentially low. Izuku opened his eyes, spotting Ishido sliding around the beast while peppering the cement with acid to prevent it from moving. His eyes moved towards Gyro, watching as the girl vibrated the earth around the creature, keeping it from finding its balance and preventing it from using its enhanced speed. Todoroki was skating counter-opposite of Ishido, coating the ground with ice to aid in keeping the creature from moving. He'd occasionally encase the beast in ice, briefly preventing it from moving. The brain. It has to be a weakness. Keep it still for a moment, Izuku ordered as he twisted his body in the air, flying towards the creature just a few feet above it. Gyro caused the ground to quake, tripping the creature up before Todoroki swept his hand forward, causing a wave of ice to crash into the creature, briefly halting it from moving forward. Izuku took aim with his index finger before channeling his fire towards his digit. He grit his teeth before shouting, "Burner Finger 1." A narrow beam of fire cannon directly into the creature, spearing through the creature's brain while simultaneously melting the flesh around it. Izuku stared at the beast for several seconds, watching as the creature ceased its thrashing. He continued to stare at it before releasing a calming breath. I think we did. Izuku's eyes widened massively upon seeing the hole in the creature's head slowly start to regenerate. A pit formed in his stomach as the blank eyes of the creature suddenly flicked towards him. Flames burst from his palms as he rocketed into the sky, avoiding the attack that was sure to come from the beast. Only, it didn't. Izuku stared down at the beast, confused as to why it was suddenly comatose. But, it regenerated. How? Todoroki-kun. Keep it frozen. Don't let it move, the green-haired teen ordered as he flew around the creature. Todoroki merely nodded his head as he skated along the terrain, freezing the beast and preventing it from moving. You brats. A shrill scream emanated several dozen meters away. You're ruining my quest. You're all just a bunch of NPCs. Izuku flicked his gaze towards the shaggy-haired villain. A fierce glare formed on his face as he lowered himself closer to the ground, facing off against the man and ignoring the various knocked-out villains around him. You, who are you? The teen demanded, flames burning wildly from his palms. Like it matters. The man screamed, scratching at his neck while causing blood to stream down his flesh. You're all interrupting my quest. You're all dead. The man-child roared angrily. Namu, kill them. It was the only warning Izuku was given. The green-haired teen blinked before a giant black fist seemed to just appear in front of his face. His brain screamed at him to move, but he couldn't. He was going to die. This was it. Move. Move. You're going to die. Move. Midoriya. Todoroki screamed frantically, sending his eyes towards the boy, desperately trying to save the teen. I'm too slow. My eyes can't reach him. Izuku. Nina shrieked in horror as she raced atop her acid, palms leaking blood as she tried to close the distance with her quirk, pushing her body past its limit. Gyro only screamed in fear as she watched that hulking creature blitz directly atop Midoriya. Midoriya. Izuku heard their screams. He could feel their fear. Was this really how he died? Would he never truly get to live out his dream? But there was people that needed to be saved. Sorry, Mom. Izuku's eyes closed not a moment later as he accepted what was about to happen. Crack. An ear-shattering bark resonated from near the front of the plaza, almost 50 meters away. Izuku's eyes slowly opened upon noticing the giant hole in the creature's head, almost as if a sniper round at that. Who could even snipe? Move Izuku. Izuku didn't need to be told twice. He surged backwards using his flames to propel himself to safety. Flying into the air using his flames, he twisted his body around to face towards the plaza, spotting a familiar head of spiky hair. His eyes lit up as he spotted Momo near the entrance of the plaza, laying on the cement while holding what appeared to be a sniper rifle. She made a sniper rifle. She could have taken his head off. No, wait. She saved his life. But she could have just as easily killed him. Izuku would process these emotions later. They certainly weren't helping. The teen watched as Momo pulled back on the bolt of the sniper, ejecting the casing of the bullet before resting her face on the weapon's cheek pad and taking aim once more. Izuku flinched as another crack emanated in the plaza. His eyes snapped towards the biological monstrosity, watching the giant hole in its brain slowly regenerate. Todoroki-kun, Izuku yelled as he propelled himself forward, zipping past the creature to get behind it. Keep it frozen. Momo has a gun. Aren't they illegal? The dual-haired teen yelled back, using his ice to skate around the motionless creature. He shot his right hand forward, encasing the creature and keeping it still. Who cares? Mina shrieked as she shook her hands, hissing in pain at the blood seeping through her hands. Just don't let it move. She tried to fling more acid but immediately dropped to her knees with a cry of pain. And my hands. I see can't. Gyro, grab Ishido and get out of here, Izuku ordered as he buffeted the remaining villains with his flames, preventing them from trying to close the distance. No dude, Gyro replied as she raced towards Mina, crouching beside the girl and gently examining her palms. I'm not leaving you guys here. Go, Izuku demanded as he blasted his fire to cover for his other classmates. All of you, get out of here. Who knows when that thing can move again. Let us deal with the rest of the villains. Todoroki and I have the best quirks for this. We can manage. Todoroki skated under Izuku, simultaneously using both his flames and ice to freeze various villains. Just go. We can hold them off. Yaoyorozu will cover you all. A harsh crack resonated near the entrance of the plaza as Momo popped another round into the creature's skull, preventing it from moving. Gyro stared down at Ishido's hands, watching as tears began to seep down the girl's cheeks. She balled her fists in frustration, watching as her classmates began to retreat while being covered by Midoriya and Todoroki. Fuck, she grumbled angrily before taking a hold of Ishido's wrists and gently pulling her to her feet. Come on dude, we're leaving. We can't, Ishido cried, turning her attention back to Izuku and Todoroki, watching as the two synchronized their quirks together, burning various villains in Midoriya's case and freezing them in Todoroki's case. A harsh crack caused Mina to flinch as she witnessed the skull of the hulking monster explode, showering the ice beneath it in blackish blood. Her unique eyes drifted towards her two classmates as they covered for the rest of them, buffeting the plaza with ice and fire. Mina wanted to stay. She wanted to help. She wanted to be of use. But her eyes dropped to her hands, noticing the fresh blood seeping through her palms and the sheer throbbing pain emanating from them. She couldn't help. She wasn't strong enough. Mina slumped against Gyro, tears falling down her face while allowing the girl to tug her away. She didn't want to be weak anymore. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to be a hero. But she couldn't be one right now. She'd only get in the way. I'm sorry, Izuku. Izuku watched as the rest of his classmates retreated, resisting the urge to flinch as another crack barked near the end of the plaza. All things considered, this was going relatively smooth. Of course, ignoring the near-death experience would be an injustice on his part. However, he was just going to pointedly ignore that. The pro heroes should be here anytime now. Ida had left nearly 10 minutes ago, racing through the hole that Yaoyorozu had originally created. Speaking of Yaoyorozu, he needed to ask her where that immense strength had come from. He thought she could only create inorganic matter. How was she buffing herself up like that? Did she manage to find a way to transform her lipids into strength? But that didn't really make sense due to the fact that her quirk was based around creating things. You're ruining everything. Izuku flicked his gaze towards the multiple hand-faced villain who had interrupted his training about Yaoyorozu's quirk. His face contorted angrily as the man ranted and raved, spewing off nonsense about how much he hated them and how he wanted them dead. Before Izuku could blast the boy with his flames, he heard an all-too-familiar chain of explosions. His green eyes snapped towards the direction, spotting Bakugo flying towards them from one of the various destinations. You're not gonna hog all the action, Deku. Bakugo roared before raining down explosions on some of the various villains. Die. Never did Izuku think he'd ever enjoy seeing the face of his childhood bully. He hated admitting it, but he knew Bakugo was incredibly gifted and talented. They needed all the help they could get, and somehow, it seemed as if the villains just kept coming. Where were they even coming from? They just keep coming. Izuku yelled as he twisted in the air, avoiding various different quirks from some of the villains. How? I thought we dealt with that teleporting villain. Bakugo grit his teeth, sweat cascading down his body as he point-blank blasted a random man. These are just extras. When I was teleported away, he released a roar before placing his palms together and creating a blinding flash of light. There were shitty villains when I landed. These guys are likely common from the other areas. Todoroki raced by the explosive teen, spewing flames and ice. We're only delaying the inevitable. He grunted before clapping both of his hands together and concentrating. He immediately ground to a stop, eyes closing as he remained motionless. Izuku immediately raced overhead, using both of his hands to blanket the area around Todoroki with his flames. We have to keep trying. It's only a matter of time before the pros get here. We are the pros, Deku. Bakugo roared, grabbing a villain by his face while channeling his quirk. Shut the fuck up and fight. Izuku ignored the boy's words as he closed his eyes, spreading his arms out wide while spinning. A tornado of fire began to emanate from his position before he abruptly stopped spinning, commanding his flames to crash down atop the plaza. Dispelling his flames for a moment, Izuku fell to the ground with sweat cascading down his face. A harsh throbbing sensation emanated from his skull, forcing him to clench one of his eyes shut. Crack, I'm gonna kill you. Izuku's eyes widened as he spun on his heel, shocked that the multiple hand-faced man had managed to dodge around his flames. He backpedaled away from the man to dodge the initial swipe of his hand. A fierce throb caused the boy to cry out in pain, dropping to a single knee while clenching his skull. You're mine now, Shigaraki screeched, fingers nearing Izuku's face. Phosphor. Izuku cringed as a wave of extremely hot and cold fire swept by him, slamming into the villain. The man screamed in agony, tumbling along the concrete while desperately trying to stop the pain from Todoroki's combined powers. Todoroki immediately skated towards Izuku, hand outstretched for the boy to grasp onto. Clasping their hands together, Todoroki offered the writhing villain nothing more than a cursory glance before skating away to get Izuku to safety. What was that? Izuku questioned while massaging his temples, hissing in pain at the migraine he was experiencing. I can combine my fire and ice, Todoroki mumbled quietly, trying to ignore the image of the man's burnt body in his head. He shook his head for a moment, briefly explaining. Combining both powers, I can use a cold fire. It does as intended, burning and freezing. Izuku glanced towards the villain, cringing as the man writhed on the floor in sheer agony. He could see the burnt flesh from here. Izuku immediately turned away, stomach churning at the sight. Crack, you extras done yet? Bakugo roared as he flew backwards, dodging various attacks from multiple villains. Shut the hell up and fight. These shitty villains aren't gonna defeat themselves. Boy, hurry up. Izuku gnashed his teeth, ignoring the throbbing pain from his skull before taking flight with his flames. Raising his hand in the air, Izuku extended both his index and his middle finger. Flames began to burn along the tips of his fingers before he swept his arm back. Burner finger 2. He proceeded to swipe the air, jettisoning flames in a wide sweeping arc. 2 layers of flames formed from his fingers before expanding outwards and growing in size. Izuku glared before mentally commanding the flames to explode. A harsh detonation slammed into Plaza, shaking the entire area while causing cinder to rain from above. After his ability, Izuku cried out in pain, clutching at his skull due to the migraine. He slammed down onto the cement shortly afterwards, writhing in pain at the mental backlash of using his flames. Midoriya. Todoroki skated towards his classmate, simultaneously freezing and burning various villains. He slid next to the boy, watching as the boy shook in pain. Todoroki grimaced before leaning over Midoriya, taking him by the arm and placing him over his shoulder. Bakugo, we need to get out of here. Huh? The teen yelled out, blasting another villain point blank. You wanna run now, icy hot? You and shitty Deku can run then. I'm not. Todoroki shook his head before slowly standing to his feet, glancing towards Midoriya with a frown. I'm getting you out, Midoriya. Crack. Todoroki blinked in shock before his vision was encased by a mountain of black flesh. His eyes widened exponentially as he stared directly into the blank eyes of the abomination they had originally been keeping comatose. His heterochromatic eyes snapped towards Momo's position, noticing the girl fighting off several villains who had managed to finally reach her. Adrenaline exploded through Todoroki's veins as he channeled an absurd amount of fire and ice in his hands. NOMU. Kill them now, Shigaraki screeched, body still writhing in agony due to the cold burns atop his flesh. The beast's gaze snapped down towards Todoroki not a moment later, causing the stoic boy to freeze up. Use them both. Now. His brain absolutely screamed at him, demanding he use both of his quirks. An explosion of fire of ice shot out from Todoroki's body as he desperately tried to escape from the genetic abomination. More. More. Ice and fire continued to stream out the boy's body as he both retreated and attacked at the same time, fighting for his very life to keep the Namu away from him. He could see the damage being done to the beast. Its flesh would dissolve and disintegrate before abruptly stitching itself back together not a moment later. No, was it adapting? Todoroki roared, channeling even more of his quirk as he rained down fire and ice upon the creature, desperately trying to prevent his and Midoriya's death. His flames began to glow brighter. Hotter. Blue flames then proceeded to spew out from his left hand, causing the creature to roar out in pain. Todoroki only pushed his power even more. He couldn't relent. He needed to keep pushing. Keep going. Keep attacking. Burning flesh wafted in the air, causing Todoroki's nose to curl in disgust. He watched as the Namu's flesh began to rot due to the extreme heat and cold temperature assaulting its enhanced body. Todoroki grit his teeth before feeling his flames and ice sputter out. His eyes widened dramatically before vertigo racked his body. Nausea coursed through him, nearly causing him to drop to his knees. No, not now. He couldn't. Not now. The Namu continued to shriek in pain, its rotting flesh slowly dripping onto the floor. It took a step forward, then another, and another still. Stay back, Todoroki yelled, falling to his knees and nearly causing Midoriya to drop off his shoulders. He continued to try to channel his quirk, his fire and ice only seemingly growing weaker. His nausea only got worse the more he tried to use his quirk. The corners of his vision began to blacken as he felt a cold sweat break out. No. How was he experiencing the drawback? He had been using his flames and ice correctly. Why now? As the Namu slowly beat back the flames, Todoroki could only watch in horror as it slowly rose its giant, half-melted arm. Flesh and bone sizzled before it abruptly slammed it down towards him. Crack! Todoroki flinched harshly as the familiar sound of Momo's sniper barked out once more. It wasn't perfect, merely grazing the creature's face at most, but it provided the necessary distraction. While the creature roared in pain from having half of its skull ripped off, Todoroki focused on his right side, creating ice and skating away with Midoriya. He began to immediately feel the drawback of his quirk as frostbite began to form on his body. He ignored the sheer cold, desperately trying to get away from the creature. Crack! Todoroki didn't even turn around to survey Yaoyorozu's handiwork. He was too busy trying to escape. Damn it. Come on. Bakugo yelled harshly, exploding towards Todoroki's position. Grab my fucking hand icy hot. Todoroki immediately rose his unfrozen hand towards Bakugo, latching onto the boy's sweaty palms while tightening his grip on Midoriya to prevent the boy from falling. Several explosions detonated behind the explosive teen as he haphazardly led them to safety. Upon reaching the balcony of the USJ, he released his hold on Todoroki, causing the three of them to slam roughly against the cement. Bakugo exhaled harshly, shaking his arms as the backlash from his quirk finally made itself known. Fuck, he hissed in pain once more, shaking his arm. Todoroki exhaled harshly, shivering fiercely before laying Midoriya down on his back. He rose his hand towards his face, channeling a small amount of fire to stifle his frostbite. It caused more nausea to rack his body, but at least he wouldn't lose his ear. Todoroki laid upon the cement, grimacing and hissing in pain before turning his head to stare at Midoriya. He frowned upon noticing the boy writhing in pain, clawing at his skull while his eyes were closed. Crack! She's still fucking there, Bakugo exclaimed harshly, slowly rising to his feet before walking towards the balcony to get a better look. Shit. His fierce expression only grew harsher as he stared down at the aftermath of the battle. There was tons of bodies littering the floor. He didn't know if they were dead or not. Crack! Bakugo's eyes snapped towards Yaoyorozu, watching as the girl shouldered her rifle, running towards the plaza with speed that shocked him. How was she that fast? Didn't she create shit? What the hell was going on? He watched her take a knee, turning towards the Namu before taking aim once more. Crack! Then she was off again, racing towards them with surprising speed. Bakugo kept his eyes glued to the girl, hands clenching the metal rail fiercely. Come on, move. He briefly entertained the thought of using his quirk just to help her, but then that familiar throbbing sensation in his arms prevented that notion. He'd likely only cause their deaths. It pissed him off. Where the fuck are our classmates? Bakugo yelled, eyes still focused on Momo, making sure she was able to retreat towards them. Todoroki grunted from his prone position, covering his eyes with the back of his arm. Most of them retreated when Midoriya told them to. We stayed back to cover for them. They're likely calling for help now that they're outside of the jamming frequency. Bakugo released a quiet sigh of relief, watching as Momo vaulted up over one of the railings, racing up towards them with her rifle slung along her back. The girl bent her knees before jumping, clearing the 15-feet gap with ease before vaulting atop the balcony. She ignored Bakugo and her classmates before placing her sniper rifle on the edge of the balcony. She took aim once more before. Crack. The girl continued to keep her scope on the monster, refusing to lose concentration for even a moment. "Bakugo-san, where is the rest of the class?" she asked while trying to calm her racing breaths. Bad breathing would cause her to miss. She couldn't afford to do so right now. A missed shot would cause their deaths. Icy Hot says they ran to get help. Bakugo grumbled roughly, finally allowing himself to relax. He slouched against the balcony before sliding down it, sighing to himself. His eyes glanced down at his uniform, spotting the holes and various scorch marks. He only had one gauntlet, having lost the other in an explosion. "Todoroki-san, how is Izuku?" Momo questioned, a slight hitch to her voice as she continued to stare at the genetic abomination through her scope. Crack. Todoroki only grimaced at the noise before answering. "He's unresponsive, likely experiencing an immense migraine due to the constant usage of his flames." Momo was silent for a moment, calming the adrenaline that wished to surge through her body. Was anyone hurt? Ishido's hands were bleeding. One of Jiro's earphone jacks were dripping blood. Uraraka was vomiting harshly. Kirishima broke one of his arms. Tsuyu has a sprained ankle and Kaminari's left arm was burned. Todoroki sounded off stoically, eyes still covered. Crack. Momo said nothing as she continued to stare at the Namu. A faint pink glow emanated from her back as she spoke. "Bakugo-san, please spot for me." The boy sucked his teeth in annoyance before eventually rising to his feet and walking towards the girl. He snatched the binoculars before they could fall from her back. Staring down at the plaza, he could spot various villains slowly coming to. He roamed his gaze along the plaza before spotting the multiple hands guy ranting and raving, screaming at the Namu to move. "Hand job is throwing a fit down there, screaming about some shit." Bakugo mumbled in annoyance. "Some of the extras are finally coming to. Some are probably dead." His words caused an uncomfortable silence, a silence that was eventually broken by the harsh crack from Momo's sniper. No one said anything, not even when the pro heroes finally managed to arrive. All Might's boisterous entrance and his frowning face did not catch the kid's attention. His frown only seemed to grow bigger as he spotted his protege. Eyes zeroed in on the scope and the weapon in her hands. "Crack. Whoa there, Missy." Snipe spoke up, racing towards Momo's position. "You can't just." "I need to." Momo spoke frantically, ignoring the pro hero's words as her hands gripped the rifle tighter. "You don't understand. It won't stay down." Her voice began to warble, breaking due to the emotions she was feeling. All Might's frown only grew bigger as he slowly walked towards his protege. His eyes glanced down at the plaza, staring down at the ruined and destroyed terrain. He spotted dozens upon dozens of men and women, all sporting various injuries. "Crack." Snipe once again spoke, frantically trying to get Yaoyorozu to stop. "Yaoyorozu." Crack, crack, crack. All Might stared down at the spot that Yaoyorozu was shooting, noting that nothing seemed to be there. The only indication of there being something was the fresh blood and unblemished scorch marks where a pair of feet would be. It just wouldn't. Momo warbled as she held tightly onto the rifle, arms shaking and trembling. "It just wouldn't stay down." Crack. All Might's normally bright eyes dulled significantly as he placed a gentle hand atop the girl's shoulder. He could feel her shaking, trembling. Her normally spiky hair lay flat, covering her face from view. Crack, crack. All Might gestured for Snipe to step away, who did so reluctantly. The #1 hero glanced to the other teachers, quietly telling them to back away. They did so without hesitation, offering aid to Todoroki, Bakugo and Izuku. Crack. All Might gazed down at Yaoyorozu sadly. He crouched to a knee, hovering just beside the girl as he stared at the position she was shooting. Crack. "You got him," All Might stated quietly, right hand gently coming down onto the girl's shoulder. Crack. "S-sensei." She spoke again, voice breaking as her body trembled. I don't understand." "It wouldn't. Not H-human." Crack. All Might would hear the bark of that sniper rifle in his dreams that night. He had failed. He hadn't been able to protect his students. It was all his fault. Shoto was a sheltered child, one that only knew life through a fish-eyed lens. The little knowledge he possessed on life and that of people were based on his own experiences with his unique family. Growing up with 3 mothers had been an experience, or so Midoriya's reaction to the knowledge had led him to believe so, at least. Shoto only really knew how to utilize his quirk and fight with it. He didn't know much of the world, aside from the odd and somewhat highly confusing lectures from his mothers. Rei, his birth mother, was a kind woman. She never rose her voice, never got truly angry, and was always supportive of him and his goals. As Def, his second mother, was. She was cruel, not to him or his siblings, but in general. It was who she was. According to his father's words, Esdeath was a retired pro-hero from Russia with baggage. She never spoke much about her past and Shoto never seen a reason to intrude. If skeletons wished to remain hidden in the closet, then he wouldn't go searching. His third mother, a dark-skinned woman who went by the name of Tyr Harable, was much like himself. She was a pro-hero from Mexico, a very high-ranking pro-hero to boot, that eventually settled down with his father after a joint mission gone wrong. She was stoic, not unlike himself, and very rarely spoke unless directly addressed. Though for all her silence and stoicism, she was as supportive, if not more so than his own mother, of his dream of becoming a hero. Each of his siblings, aside from his eldest brother, were all half-brothers, sisters. The only true blood he shared was with Taoya. They had a strained relationship. Years before he had been born, Taoya had possessed a lofty goal that was only achievable in a false reality. Or so Esdeath had said one night in her rare bouts of sanity. Taoya's quirk was powerful, a fire that burned brighter and hotter than even his own and father's. However, Taoya's quirk came with a severe drawback. He was not resistant to the flames he conjured. He was, however, highly resistant to ice, taking his mother's resistance to the power with ease, but his flames, they more often than not burned him severely if he wasn't careful. The man possessed his bevy of scars from overusing his quirk and seemed to show little care for the pain. Tyr had complimented his eldest brother, saying that a bull would struggle to achieve his level of stubbornness. Taoya and Shoto never knew where the animosity came from. Perhaps it was due to the perfect blend of father and mother's quirk. Perhaps it was the encouraging words that father would say to him. Who was to say? Taoya had long since abandoned his dream of becoming the #1 hero in Japan. A goal that Shoto had taken to heart upon happenstance when he was first learning how to wield his flames and ice. Shoto did not necessarily blame his elder brother. The resentment and anger at seeing something you wanted so badly, only to have it crushed before your very eyes, had to be soul-shattering. He was everything that Taoya wanted to be. He was resistant to both his flames and his ice. He could wield his fire without harm. He didn't need to worry about harming himself. He was the perfect blend of his mother and father. Shoto pitied Taoya, not out of dislike or hate but due to circumstance. He wanted to bond with his brother. He wanted to know about him. In his 15 years of life, Shoto only possessed the bare basics of Taoya's life. He didn't know what the man liked, what he enjoyed to do in his free time, or even what his favorite food dish was. It stung. So, it came as a major surprise that the first person he awoke to in his infirmary room was that of Taoya. Shoto's tired, heterochromatic eyes gazed at his eldest brother, watching the man as he stood in front of the windows of the infirmary room, gazing out into UA High. Brother, Shoto spoke quietly, eyes creasing in the rather dark room. He watched the man's shoulders tense, head snapping towards his direction. Shoto's mismatched eyes briefly dipped to his brother's bandaged arms before the man hid them behind his back. Taoya's turquoise eyes were indecipherable for a moment as he stared at his youngest sibling. He resisted the urge to pick at his scars, eventually turning back around to gaze out the window. Shoto, he spoke quietly. I heard what happened. The aforementioned teen remained silent, fingers clenching against the thin blanket from the bed. His near death at the hands of the Namu sprang in his mind, followed by the debilitating feeling of watching his friend nearly die, being helpless to prevent it. Shoto's palms itched with a ferocity he hadn't thought possible. His quirk begged for release, to be used as an outlet for his frustration and feelings of uselessness. He clenched them tightly, grimacing as his nails bit into his palms. Father is on his way. Taoya continued quietly, gazing out the window but not really looking at anything. How are you feeling? Shoto was silent as he digested the question. How was he feeling? Useless, angry, frustrated, disappointed, scared. He had seen his life flash before his very eyes. He'd been helpless in a situation to save someone who really needed it. That fear had even managed to cause his flames to burn blue. It should have been seen as an accomplishment. That was the first time that he had managed to alter the heat of his flames to such a degree. But it was hollow at best. His flames hadn't mattered. That monster had just kept coming. It didn't matter how much ice and fire he spewed at it. It only continued towards him, hellbent on snuffing his life out. Shoto's eyes fell to his hands, just now noticing the shakes and trembles. He spoke quietly, licking his lips. I'm scared. Taoya didn't react. Yeah, the bandaged man spoke quietly. I can see that. He paused for a moment, eyes straying to his brother in the reflection of the window. How did it feel? Shoto furrowed his eyebrows in confusion. To kill someone, Taoya clarified. Shoto's eyes widened to an abnormal degree. What are you saying? Taoya's eyes narrowed sadly before he closed then, refusing to look at his distraught brother. Shoto, you killed people today. The youngest Todoroki could do nothing but stare at his brother's back, mouth agape in shock. Blood pounded through his ears, eyes dilating and becoming unfocused. His thoughts began to spiral quickly. He only wanted to. He was trying to save. Shoto blinked, finding himself on the floor of the infirmary, dry heaving into a trash bin. His eyes were slick with tears, throat burning from the stomach acid that continued to fling from his mouth. He heaved once more into the bin, feeling a hand gently rubbing against his back. Shoto's thoughts continued to race, tears streaming down his face as he continued to puke into the trash can. He killed people. How? When? Another bout of vomit spewed from his mouth, spraying the bin and coloring it in a disgusting shade of browns and greens. Taoya only sighed quietly as he crouched next to his younger brother, providing what meager comfort he could. It wouldn't be enough. Taoya knew that. This wasn't supposed to happen. He may have resented his youngest brother when he was growing up, but he didn't envy his brother. Taoya hadn't envied him for quite some time. But right now, he only pitied his brother. The beeping had long since grown incessant. It grated his mind, causing a cacophony of sounds to erupt in his mind, furthering angering his already crippling migraine. Izuku very nearly snarled as he resisted the urge to rip off the cloth covering his eyes. He knew not where he was, other than being somewhat familiar with the smell of antiseptics. A vicious throbbing nearly had him screaming, hands desperately trying to claw at his skull to somehow soothe the pain he was in. Odd, he couldn't actually move his arms. Izuku took a moment to try to move his arms and found his wrists being somewhat snatched once they reached a certain point. It was almost as if, he was being restrained to his bed. It was probably for the best, if he was being honest. Overusing his quirk would lead to vicious migraines. Migraines that tended to have him scratching and clawing at his temples to try to soothe the pain. It was irrational, Izuku knew. It wouldn't soothe the pain, but it'd momentarily distract him from the mental pain. After all, physical pain was more bearable than mental, or at least he believed so. Izuku, he heard a familiar voice yell, "My baby." He was prepared for the crying that came, even somewhat prepared for the extraordinarily powerful hug that came from his mother. What he wasn't prepared for, however, was the cries of surprise from two other familiar voices. Midoriya, Izuku. The green-haired teen could only groan in minor discomfort as the weight upon his body nearly tripled. Ashido-san, J-Gyro-san. He mumbled in surprise, grunting at a particularly powerful squeeze from who he assumed to be was his mother. "Mom, my baby." The older woman cried dramatically as she held on to her child, crushing him against the bed. "And Mom, please." Izuku squeaked harshly, hissing in pain as his head pounded once more due to his fading migraine. The fire user released a sigh of relief as the women released their holds on him. It was short-lived, blissful as it was. "Ladies, please." An older woman's voice spoke out sharply. "Give the boy some room. He's suffering from a major migraine and all your yelling is going to reignite it. Miracles do exist. And as for you, young man," Recovery Girl half-hissed, yelled, "how could you be so reckless, using your flames like that? You're in deep water, mister." Damn it. It was all a lie. A fallacy. Miracles were a con. Izuku's pitiful groan was enough to dissuade RG's wrath. The elderly women slowly saddled up next to the teen, monitoring his vitals whilst writing several notes on a document attached to a clipboard. "Midoriya-san is prone to extreme migraines from overusing his quirk," the elderly pro-hero questioned Inko. The petite mother dipped her head, speaking with a minute frown. "It's been years since I've seen it so bad." "What happened?" The room quickly became uncomfortable, something that Inko immediately took notice of. Her green eyes shifted towards the two teens, frown growing larger at the way they curled in on themselves. Inko could see the wounds they sported clear as day. The pink-skinned girl, Mina, had bandages wrapped all along her hands, ending near her elbow. The shorter girl with purple hair, Gyro, had bandages wrapped along her unique-looking ears. "What happened to my son?" Inko demanded, eyes snapping towards the elderly pro-hero. "Mom, it wasn't." Izuku tried to interject, only to get railroaded by his mother. "You, be quiet," Inko demanded, sparing her beloved son a glance. "I want answers. I want them now. What could have been so drastic that forced my child to overuse his quirk to such a degree that he has to be restrained in bed for?" She was livid. She knew that Izuku craved the day where he could be a hero, but she wouldn't allow it to happen at the expense of his health. Recovery Girl frowned at the irate woman. She was silent for a moment before ultimately sighing. She went to open her mouth before the door to the infirmary room slowly opened. Several men came into the room, ranging from police officers and what Inko could assume to be lawyers or businessmen of some kind. That will be all, recovery girl. One of the men spoke, briefly flashing a badge. Detective Tsukachi. He greeted with a nod to Inko. I have the answers to your questions, but you won't like them, Mrs. Midoriya. This she corrected instantly, eyes hardening as she shifted her body towards the detective. Ms. Midoriya. Her eyes narrowed at the men in the room, briefly shifting towards her son. Why is there multiple police officers in this room? More importantly, what would merit the appearance of such? Has my son committed a crime? That is to be determined, ma'am. One of the officers spoke briskly. Mina's face scrunched up at the man's tone. Hey, what do you mean to be determined? Izuku didn't do anything wrong. He saved us. He saved everyone today. You can't treat him like a criminal. Ashido-san. Izuku grimaced, trying to raise the cloth from his face. Can someone remove these restraints? Inko's eyes shifted towards her son, utilizing her quirk to undo the leather straps on her son's wrists. What is the meaning of this? She exclaimed, stepping in front of her son and shielding him from the police. My son doesn't have an evil bone in his body. What crime is he being accused of? Murder. The same police officer stated in annoyance. The detective released an aggravated sigh, shifting towards the officers behind him. I told you to let me handle this. Get out. You're only going to escalate the situation. And murder. Izuku croaked as he ripped the bandages off his face, cringing as the light assaulted his face. What? Ashido and Mina squawked in disbelief, eyes widening in shock as they stood ramrod straight. Inko herself was completely floored at the answer, not even able to entertain the idea that her son could murder anyone. The detective sighed quietly to himself, escorting the police officers out of the room while massaging his temples. Just my luck, he grumbled quietly, seeing the open animosity beginning to form in Inko's eyes. Tsukachi could see the disbelief slowly turning to anger in the two teens' faces as well. This was going to be a long day. Ms. Midoriya, I ask that you please remain. I will not. The woman practically barked out, rudely interrupting the detective. You cannot expect me to believe that my son has the capacity to murder someone. You come here in a show of force with your little puppets and accuse my baby of committing such heinous actions. Are you daft? You take me for some kind of idiot. Izuku cringed at his mother's words, never having seen her so angry in all his years of life. It was terrifying to say the least. Recovery girl, wisely, vacated the room after Inko's words. She was far too old to get involved with a mother protecting her son. It was not her business. Detective Tsukachi cringed at the woman's words. Possibly not the best thing to say to a woman, let alone a mother. I meant no disrespect, Ms. Midoriya. He rose his hands in a placating manner, briefly shifting his gaze around the room and spotting a chair in the corner of the room. I only came here to question Midoriya-san about today's events. I had no intentions of accusing him of committing murder. Inko watched the man like a hawk, crossing her arms against her bust and standing her ground. I find that hard to believe, Tsukachi-san. Please, explain yourself. Slowly, the detective released a quiet sigh before slowly moving towards the open seat in the room and sitting himself down. He scratched at his cheek for a moment, clasping his hands together before speaking. Before I can get to my questions, you must be made aware of crucial information. Information that has yet to be released publicly. He spoke slowly and concisely, noting that the woman seemed to understand the undermeaning of his words. Ms. Midoriya, what I'm about to tell you must remain in this room, for now at least. We cannot afford to allow this sensitive information to become public. UA High is under enough scrutiny with the HPSC. This event will only cause a domino effect. What are you getting at, detective? Inko questioned calmly, briefly glancing at the teenagers in the room. She noticed the way they grimaced, nearly huddling together like. Her shoulders began to slowly droop. She recognized the looks in their eyes, the way their shoulders tensed and how their eyes flicked across the room rapidly. What had caused such stress and trauma? What happened to these children, detective? Inko demanded harshly. The detective rubbed his face with one of his hands before speaking slowly. Class 1 was targeted by a group of villains on UA High soil. They were ambushed by nearly 60 villains, forced to fight and fend for their lives. Tsukachi bowled through his explanation, trying to ignore the horror growing in Inko's eyes. The scale of this attack is currently unknown, as details have been incredibly sparse. We have not interviewed all of the students and are still piecing the puzzle together. However, he grimaced here, knowing how volatile his next words could come across. Several of these villains were confirmed dead. The detective paused for a moment, eyes falling to the table in front of him as he ignored the gasps from Inko, Ashido, Gyro, and Izuku. Several villains were shot. The caliber of bullet, .308. The casings matched with the rifle used by one of your classmates, Momoye Urazu. 7 men and women fell to Urazu's rifle. They did not suffer. Tsukachi continued to stare down at the table as he briefly covered his mouth. A confirmed 8 villains were. He paused for a moment before slowly raising his gaze to stare directly into Izuku's eyes. Immolated. Several of those individuals sported burns in the 3rd degree and some had even been charred to near unrecognizable levels. Tsukachi hid his grimace, watching as Izuku nearly fell from his bed, dry heaving on the floor. He closed his eyes at the sight of the boy's mother rushing towards her son, comforting him as best as she could. The detective bowed his head with a frown, hearing the crying emanating from the mother and son. These were children that had been forced to kill to protect themselves. His line of work was never sunny, dull and gray, usually. But this was disgusting. How was a child supposed to react to this information? How could one stare into the eyes of an innocent, accusing them of committing an atrocity so heinous that they'd never see life the same again? Tsukachi saw the look in the boy's eyes when he mentioned Ieyaruzu's confirmed kills. He had seen the disbelief, the righteous anger and shock. Protecting yourself was one thing. Self-defense laws existed for a reason. I should also mention that another 6 of these villains succumbed to hypothermia. Tsukachi muttered quietly. Ieyaruzu-san, Todoroki-san and you, Midoriya-san. He paused before shaking his head. The evidence presented in the USJ building points to you 3. You 3, in self-defense, killed 21 men and women today. Momo hadn't spoken a word since learning of the information in the aftermath of what had happened today. She stared blankly out the window of the principal's office, ignoring her surroundings. Nezu had not the answers she desired or needed. Human emotions weren't his expertise. Familiar with patterns and stigmata, yes, but to deal with these issues, no. Momo had been forced to kill today. Simple and plainly, a child was not meant to think of survival. A hero school they were, but a military organization they were not. Their only worries should have been on the homework due the next day, not if they were going to survive an insurmountable event with their backs against the wall. Nezu could only offer what he believed to be a realist's words. Those deaths are not on you. Momo didn't react, eyes still blankly staring at nothing. In a monotone voice, she replied, I don't care anymore. She rested her forehead against the window, closing her eyes. Where were the heroes when we needed them? Nezu remained silent at the question, glancing towards the door, noticing Toshinori's looming figure. It doesn't matter if they were villains, Momo continued. It doesn't matter if my actions are excused. It doesn't matter. She paused for a moment, placing one of her hands on the glass of the window, biting back the tears that wished to fall. We were forced to kill. What can you realistically say to me, Principal Nezu? That it was you or them? It shouldn't have had to happen in the first place. Momo's eyes slowly opened, spotting her sensei in the reflection of the window. None of this would have happened had you been there, sensei. Her fingers scraped down the glass of the window. But you weren't. You weren't there. You weren't there when we needed you. Tears began to slip down her cheeks, though her face remained blank. Where was our hero when we needed him the most? All Might had no words for his apprentice. What could he realistically say to Momo? That he was sorry. It'd do nothing. An apology could not cover the fresh blood that stained the girl's hands. Weapon or not, a death was a death. It was less visceral, of course, but Momo was not a soldier. She was only a child. Ambitions of being a hero, yes, but a killing machine that only followed orders. No, All Might could only stare at his students back in shame. He had no excuses and he wouldn't make any. He knew he was limited these days. 3 hours were the best he could do on a good day. The fact he had used all of it before the day had even began was telling. His students wouldn't have had to suffer, wouldn't have had to stain their hands. They wouldn't have been traumatized in such a manner. Momo refused to wipe her tears as she stared at her sensei's reflection. A sad smile framed her face as she abruptly shifted on her heel. She was silent as she walked towards All Might. You chose the wrong person, sensei, she said simply, a pained smile on her face before departing the room. All Might only gazed down at the floor, watching Momo leave the office without another word. He had failed. Shame painted his features, knowing he had truly failed at being the hero he used to be. Izuku was numb as he stared at the ceiling of his room. Darkness enveloped his vision, shadows twisting and roaming along his room. It had been 2 days since the incident at USJ. He hadn't left his room since then. The police had broke the news of the attack and life was. Izuku glanced down at his phone, frown growing larger at the time. 3:07 a.m. 3 students involved in the killing of 21 villains at UA High. 21 men and women perished at the hands of 3 heroes in training. Heroes in training defend themselves, slaughtering nearly 24 men. The headlines were sickening. A tragedy being made a mockery at the hands of the media. Blood was spilled and like the sharks they truly were, feasted on the buffet. UA High was under no small amount of scrutiny due to the events. News stations berated the school, questioning how an institution as prestigious as UA High was unable to handle this unforeseen situation. Izuku scoffed, covering his face with his arm as he rolled in his bed. How was any of this truly UA's fault? Laws were formed once the crime had been ultimately committed. Izuku highly doubted that another situation was to occur like this, at least not directly within UA High. Perhaps on a field trip of some kind, exposed to the cruel nature of this world and all its misgivings. Izuku shook his head, rolling around in his bed once more, unable to catch even a moment of sleep. The traumatic events had left him scarred. Every time his eyes closed, he'd see that hulking monstrosity. He'd dream of his death at the hands of the Namu, unable to defend himself. In a detached manner, he'd see it target his classmates, decimating them and ripping them apart. Izuku cringed at the memories, rolling in his bed once more. He called upon the power of his quirk. The familiar warmth of his fire offered him no respite. He could only see the burnt carcasses of the men and women he'd killed. Izuku stared at his flames in a detached manner. He knew his quirk was deadly. Fire was an unforgiving element. It could save you. It could burn you. Fire was beautiful in a twisted way. For as bright as it was, it could also produce no small amounts of darkness. Ash, cinder and smoke. Fire was beautiful. Fire was deadly. It possessed a mind of its own. Fire was neither evil nor good. It distinguished between no one. His quirk wasn't any different. Its only caveat was that it was attached to him. His fire. It was the embodiment of who he was. He had used his fire to kill. Not knowingly, of course. He had merely been trying to protect his classmates and friends. Did he regret it? Izuku frowned as his flames grew brighter, illuminating his room brightly. No. Why should he? His flames shifted, growing larger while twisting in the air. The flames expanded, life being breathed into them as Izuku mindlessly guided the element around his room. Those villains wouldn't have gave him and his classmates any respite. They had only wished to cause harm and chaos. Izuku clenched his fist, causing his flames to spontaneously combust. A small implosion spread throughout his room as he snuffed the flames out of the air. Soot slowly spread along his room and he ignored it with ease. He'd long since grown used to such trivial byproducts of his quirk. His flames had saved him, saved his classmates, saved his friends. Why should he look at them any differently? Those villains had chosen their path that day. He'd spit on their grave if given the chance. VVRRTT. VVRRTT. Izuku blinked slowly at the quiet noise. His eyes shifted towards his phone as he reached for the item. His eyebrows furrowed for a moment, spotting the text message that had appeared on his home screen. Ashido, you up? I can't sleep divided by. Me, you too. Ashido, how you holding up? Everything okay? Izuku briefly smiled at the girl's question. Me, as best I can really. What about you? Everything okay? Ashido, my hands still hurt but at least I can finally use the bathroom by myself. Wiping was a real pain in the butt. Literally. Izuku released an embarrassed groan at the girl's text. Why? Me, Ashido, please. TMI. Ashido, haha. What is it? We girls gotta poop too. The boy only grumbled again, rolling over his pillow as he responded. Me, you're too much, Ashido. Ashido, don't act like you don't like it. Ashido, do you KNW when we're supposed to go back to school? Me, Friday. Or at least, that's what I've been told. Ashido took a few minutes to respond this time. He could see her typing a response, then immediately deleting it and rewriting something else. Ashido, Gyro and I are going to visit Yamomo today. Wanna come with? Me, I'd love to. What time? Ashido, like an hour or so. Izuku's face scrunched up at the girl's words. His eyes shifted towards the time on his phone and he nearly dropped it. 3:47 a.m. Me, it's almost 4 a.m. Ashido. Ashido, so, you coming or not? Izuku sighed quietly to himself, gaze turning away from his phone. He slowly stood to his feet, shuffling over to the window in his room. He leaned against the object, staring out into the darkness with pursed lips. Well, it wouldn't hurt, right? He'd been holed up in his room since the USJ incident, and his mother was likely worrying herself sick. He released a quiet sigh before glancing back down at his phone. Me, sure. Let me take a shower. What's her address? I'll meet you guys there. Ashido, ooh. Send pics. Let me see the GUUDS. A fierce blush erupted on his face at the girl's text. Me, ASHIDO, please. Ashido, I love a boy who begs. Izuku very nearly fainted at the girl's words. Throwing his phone on his bed, he shifted through his drawers, searching for a fresh pair of clothes to wear. He took a shower, brushed his teeth, applied his trusty All Might deodorant and left a note explaining that he'd gone to visit a friend and he'd be back later. It'd probably only worry his mother even more considering he was leaving in the middle of the night, but he just had to get out of his room. Izuku loved being alone and the silence it provided, but after the USJ incident, Being alone with his thoughts was the last thing he really needed right now. He glanced down at his phone, riding alone in one of the subway carts. I'm on my way. Ashido, Gyro and I just got here. Take your time. Izuku merely responded with a thumbs-up emoji, one that Ashido teased him for. Rolling his eyes with a smile, the teen placed his phone back in his pocket and awaited his stop. A couple of minutes passed by before the cart stopped, allowing Izuku to get off. He walked through the darkened city, noticing how much wealthier this precinct was compared to others. It was almost like night and day. Some of these houses could fit nearly a dozen of his apartments in them. As Izuku neared the address given by Ashido, he spotted the two girls under one of the street lights, talking to each other. Waving to get their attention, he began to jog their way, idly glancing towards the manor he assumed to belong to Yaoyorozu. It was a gated mansion that sported a giant stylized Y on the gate. If it wasn't the Yaoyorozu family, he'd eat his red sneakers. Izu-kun, Ashido exclaimed with a large smile, waving her hand back and forth rapidly. Yo, Midoriya. Gyro waved with a soft smile. He stopped a few feet in front of them, offering them a once-over. Ashido was wearing a yellow sundress that sported several colorful flowers on it. It was a simple dress, incredibly short, but simple. Gyro wore a crew-cut black sweater and a pair of black leggings. A bit of jewelry was wrapped around her neck and wrists, slightly surprising him. He himself wore a simple white hoodie with black joggers and his trusty red high tops. How are you? He asked with a small smile, glancing towards Yaoyorozu's mansion. She's loaded. Ashido spoke with a smirk. Filthy rich. Gyro piped up with a similar smile. Your comments are completely unnecessary. Momo's voice spoke dryly from the intercom on her house's gate. I'm unlocking the gate. Please, come in. The butler will see you in. So modest. Ashido cooed with a teasing smile, causing Gyro to snicker in amusement. Izuku only shrugged with a small smile, following behind the two girls as the gate opened. Have you heard from Todoroki, Midoriya? Gyro asked curiously, idly bouncing atop the fancy rocks leading to Momo's home. Izuku sighed quietly at the question. We spoke very briefly on Wednesday after the news was dropped. Todoroki texted me last night asking about the assignments from Wednesday. You think he'd come over if you'd ask? Ashido questioned curiously as she hopped from rock to rock like Gyro. It's almost 5 in the morning, Ishido-san. Izuku responded with a quiet sigh, resisting the urge to yawn. Gyro shrugged her shoulders. Couldn't hurt to ask, you know. The fire user shrugged his shoulders before pulling out his phone and sending a text to Todoroki. Me, Todoroki-kun. You up? He was about to place his phone back in his pocket before his phone immediately vibrated. Todoroki-kun, do you need something? Midoriya. Me, I'm currently at Yaoyorozu-san's house with Ashido-san and Gyro-san. They wanted to know if you wanted to come over and hang out. It's okay if you can't. Todoroki-kun, address. Izuku rose an eyebrow before typing Yaoyorozu's address and sending it to the fire ice user. Todoroki-kun, on my way. Izuku blinked at the response before sending the boy an affirmative text and putting his phone away. Todoroki-kun is on his way, he stated simply. Ashido and Gyro glanced his way, slightly surprised at how fast Todoroki had responded. He's up, Gyro questioned curiously. He's already coming, Ashido asked right after. Izuku shrugged his shoulders at the questions. Maybe he's having trouble sleeping too. His words caused a pair of frowns to form on the girls' faces. It wasn't a secret anymore. The news had practically plastered Todoroki, Midoriya and Yaoyorozu's faces in each and every headline. Principal Nezu had tried to diminish the damage as much as he could, but the media were like rabid dogs. Their faces were plastered along each and every headline, stating that they were the reason the villains had suffered such casualties. It was disgusting how low the media companies could get. They were just kids. Where was their privacy? How had the police even allowed this? It was an invasion of privacy of the highest degree. Sure, some of the more egregious headlines and outlets had been taken down, but the damage was done. Everyone knew about the trio that had killed 21 villains on UA soil. It was an unnecessary burden placed atop their shoulders. It would affect their lives forever. Come on, Izu-kun. Mina spun on her heels, grabbing the green-haired teen by his arm and spinning him alongside her. His yelp of surprise only caused her grin to grow larger. Wanna dance? She questioned with a cheeky grin. Yeah. He coughed with reddened cheeks. I don't know how to dance. Ashido laughed the boy's words off, gently taking one of his hands with her bandaged ones, before placing one of them on her hip and the other on her lower back. It's simple. She spoke with a smile, staring into his eyes. Just follow my lead, yeah. 1-2 step to the left, then repeat to the right. Don't worry about anything else, K. Izuku mumbled in embarrassment, nearly tripping on his feet as Ashido guided them side to side. His smile began to grow softer before a random song began to play. His eyes snapped towards Gyro, watching the girl holding her phone up while playing some kind of classical music. His cheeks exploded red at the gesture while Mina giggled. Gyro is a perfect wingman. The pink-skinned girl spoke with a sly smile, eyeing the purple-haired girl. Gyro rolled her eyes with a snort. Shut up. Izuku only blushed as he clumsily followed Mina's guidance, allowing the girl to dictate the speed at which they moved. As he allowed himself to relax, he fell into a rhythm with the pink-skinned girl, smile growing more genuine. Spin me. Mina spoke with a small grin, suddenly detaching herself from the boy who scrambled to follow through with the request. Izuku clumsily allowed the girl to twirl, awkwardly moving his feet to match the girl's own movement. Mina paused briefly, bandaged hand holding onto the boy's own. Clasping her fingers through his own, she twirled her back toward the boy. With a small smirk, the girl molded her back against his chest, holding his wrist and forcing his arm to encircle her body. She felt his breath hitch at the action, causing her smirk to grow larger. "Oh, nervous," she cooed with a smile, tilting her head to gaze into his green eyes. "Just a little," he mumbled with reddened cheeks, trying not to move against Mina's body. "Just kiss already." Gyro piped up from the sideline, laughing as Midoriya immediately pulled away from Mina, spluttering in embarrassment. Mina only smiled at the boy's action, giggle as he profusely apologized. "Come on, Izuku. If I didn't want you all over me, I'd have said something." She offered the boy a wink as she walked past him, sashaying her hips. "Quit starring, dude." Gyro teased with a grin. "IW wasn't." He squawked with red cheeks. "Suura." The purple-haired girl called back teasingly, catching up with Mina as they both giggled. Was that a setup? It had to be. He had been conned. Izuku rubbed his face before seeing a pair of headlights slowly approach. He twisted his head towards the direction, spotting a car parking itself next to the curb leading up to Yaoyorozu's gate. Spotting a familiar head of crimson and white, Izuku turned towards his classmates before calling out to them. "Todoroki-kun is here. I'll meet up with you too." The two girls merely offered a simple wave, acknowledging his words before closing the distance to Momo's house. Walking down the large driveway that led towards the gate, Izuku tilted his head, overhearing Todoroki speaking with his mom. "If you need me, call." The woman spoke quietly. "I will." Shoto responded quietly, bowing his head. The woman nodded her head before her eyes shifted towards Izuku's direction. A blonde eyebrow rose, recognizing the child immediately. "You must be Izuku Midoriya." Todoroki shifted away from the car's window, revealing a woman that most certainly wasn't Todoroki's biological mother. This woman possessed olive skin with blonde, practically yellow, hair. Her face was completely unreadable, nearly resembling a robot as her aqua-green eyes stared directly at him. Izuku offered a small, awkward wave with a nervous smile. "Why, you must be one of Todoroki-kun's mothers. It's nice to meet you." The woman rose an eyebrow, briefly glancing Shoto's way before returning towards him. "You would be correct." She said nothing for a moment, eyes seemingly scrutinizing the green-haired teen. "Take care of my son." Without another word, the woman drove off, leaving the two teens alone on the side of the street. Izuku blinked at the sudden departure, glancing towards Todoroki, who didn't seem the least bit affected. "Who? I guess. Which mom was that?" Izuku questioned awkwardly. "Tear Harable." Todoroki responded simply. "She was father's third wife. She was a high-ranking pro-hero, specifically being the third-ranked pro in Mexico. After a joint mission with father, which ended poorly, they began to see each more frequently. The rest is history, I suppose." Izuku didn't really have a response for that. "That's neat," he stated awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I agree." Shoto responded with a nod. "I assume that Ishido and Gyro are already inside." Izuku nodded his head before gesturing for Todoroki to follow. The two quietly made their way up the driveway, spotting a butler standing near the entrance of the large mansion. The butler said nothing, merely gesturing with his arm for them to follow. Upon entering the home, Izuku couldn't help but gawk at the absurdity of the home. Paintings, marble busts, statues of all kinds. It was kind of cliché to some degree. Izuku had kind of hoped that rich people weren't so flippant. Flippant was probably the word. Flippant with their money. What was the point of all these unnecessary items? Perhaps it wasn't fair of Izuku to think these things. After all, he didn't need all those posters, action figures, and merchandise of All Might. But he definitely wanted all of it, so it kind of made sense. After a few minutes, the butler offered his arm towards what Izuku and Shoto assumed to be Momo's room. The elderly man knocked on the door, awaiting for a response. "Come in." The butler opened the door for the two boys, holding his arm out for them to enter. They did so immediately, the door being closed for them soon after. Izuku and Todoroki blinked at the sheer size of the room. It was nearly the size of Izuku's entire apartment. The girl's bed was gigantic. Almost 20 people could comfortably sleep on it. Is such a bed truly necessary? Shoto questioned curiously, tilting his head. It may not be necessary, but it's hella comfy. Mina responded with a giggle, hanging her head off the bed while flipping her feet, unknowingly flashing the other two girls on the bed. Dude, Gyro groaned, turning her head away from Ishido. Why am I always seeing your underwear? The pink-skinned girl giggled as she continued to flip her feet. Don't act like you don't like it, Jiru. I don't play for the other team. Gyro mumbled whilst rolling her eyes. What a chamois, Ishido teased with a smile. We'd make a cute couple. Dude, Mina's carefree giggles caused a bout of smiles to form on everyone's face. Well, everyone aside from Todoroki. Not that he didn't find it amusing. He was just incredibly stoic about most things. Izuku slowly rotated his head around the room as he neared the bed. He was in a girl's room. This was a first. Didn't help that it was huge. How odd. Speaking aloud, cutie, Mina playfully sang, scrolling through her phone as she checked various social media apps. Izuku made a choking noise as his cheeks bled red. Always with the mumbles. When would it end? Was he forever cursed with a speech impediment? Still talking aloud, Midoriya-san. Momo spoke simply, idly brushing her hair. NOOO. As Izuku mumbled to himself, coincidentally having a mental breakdown. Shoto made his way towards Momo's bed before removing his shoes and taking a seat upon the furniture several feet away from the girls. It is soft. He spoke quietly to himself, hand stroking the bed as he laid down, allowing a faint smile to form on his face. Told ya. Mina responded with a small grin. Izuku finally calmed himself down as he removed his shoes. Is it okay if if I join you on the bed? Are you asking me a question or are you confused, Midoriya-san? Momo teased lightly, giggling at the embarrassed stammers from the boy. It's fine, Midoriya-san. Please, make yourself comfortable. Izuku offered the curvy girl a shy smile before taking a next to Shoto, a foot away, before slowly laying back onto the unnaturally comfortable bed. Wow, this is the greatest thing I've ever laid on. Izuku mumbled softly, closing his eyes and allowing his body to sink further into the furniture. You ain't lying. Gyro mumbled quietly, one of her ear jacks plugged into her phone as she listened to music. This is by far the most comfortable thing I've laid on. The teens descended into comfortable silence. The only sound being heard was the muffled giggles of Mina as she watched various videos. The minutes trickled by for the teens before Ishido suddenly spoke, directing a question towards Shoto. Hey, Todoroki. Ishido shifted her head towards the boy, watching as he creaked an eye open. This might sound kinda disrespectful and I don't want it to, but how did you get that scar on your face? You don't have to answer if you don't want to, I'm just curious. Todoroki blinked at the question, shifting his gaze to the others, noting how their curious gazes. It happened when I was younger. I was training to use both of my quirks at the same time. My father suggested I boil water using my fire, and then quickly try to freeze it. He paused for a moment, hand grazing along his scarred skin. I lost focus for only a moment. I flipped the pan of water, splashing scalding water across my face. Damn dude. Gyro mumbled with a frown. Izuku grimaced, knowing the feeling of scalding water all too well due to his own quirk. Oh man, that sucks, Ishido mumbled. The girl rose her bandaged hand in the air, resisting the urge to pick at the dry skin under her bandages. I remember the first time I hurt myself with my acid. Safe to say I've been a lot more careful since then. I can sympathize, Todoroki-kun. Izuku mumbled, glancing at the boy. Even with my resistance to fire, I've burnt myself multiple times. Coupled with my quirk's mental lashbacks, migraines and burns aren't the best combination. Damn, your quirks are brutal. Gyro spoke, tucking a pillow under her head as she grabbed one of her ear jacks. My ears start to bleed if I overuse them. It definitely hurts, but most of my pain stems from incredibly loud things. I guess that's a pretty crappy drawback. I can't utilize my quirk if I don't eat a specific amount of calories. Momo commented as she laid her brush down. If I use too much of my lipids, I grow weak, physically. My body becomes gaunt and it's a struggle to remain conscious. Izuku blinked at the response. Speaking of your quirk, how did you manage to get so strong at USJ? Izuku asked curiously, eyes gleaming. Instead of creating objects, you somehow managed to augment your physical body. Didn't you say your quirk was centered around creating things? Momo glanced at her classmates, noticing their intrigued stares. Well, it wasn't as if she hadn't prepared an explanation in the off chance she had to reveal one for all. While the basis of my quirk centers around the ability to create inorganic matter, I've also managed to single out and control those cells. Using the extra calories from the food I eat, I can transform those extra lipids into pure energy to suit any particular need, so long as it is in reason with my body. Momo demonstrated this by holding out her arm and channeling OFA. Her arm began to glow a bright pink, similar to the effect of using her creation. Before their very eyes, Momo's arm seemed to bulk up, gaining a significant amount of muscle to her otherwise curvy frame. This potentially may just be how my quirk functions. Who's to say? She shrugged her shoulders before deactivating OFA, allowing her arm to return to normal. I've always been able to alter and control my body's caloric intake to a degree that baffled scientists. Augmenting the physical parts of my body using my own lipids doesn't seem that far off. She mentally breathed a sigh of relief as Izuku seemed to accept her words at face value. He was far too perceptive for his own good. Watching the boy and Todoroki synchronize their quirks during the USJ had been a thing of beauty and terror. Izuku seemed to understand what exactly he could and couldn't do in regards to working around his ice classmate. He had even managed to match Todoroki's output of fire, matching the strength and heat of the boy's quirk with ease. It was a frightening thing. Izuku was a terrifying opponent due to this. He was methodical in his approach to combat and possessed the intelligence to boot. That's interesting. Izuku mumbled quietly to himself, stroking his chin as he contemplated the potential uses for such a quirk. I know that quirk evolutions are a thing. They're rare, only happening when the mental state of the user is deteriorating or their life is in danger. I assume Todoroki-san experienced this when he managed to supercharge his flames to make them blue. Yaoyorozu questioned, glancing at the boy. That was the first time I ever managed to conjure blue flames. I originally didn't think it was possible. Only my father and older brother are capable of utilizing blue flames. Todoroki responded, raising his left hand in the air while staring at it. I didn't want to die. His words caused the teens to grow silent. The only thing in my mind was getting away and saving Midoriya. I pushed everything I had into my flames. He closed his eyes, allowing his arm to fall upon the bed. Even with all of that, it still wasn't enough. How could something like that exist? Izuku frowned at Todoroki's words. No matter how much I burned it, it just shrugged it off. What kind of biological monstrosity did those villains make? Hey, you don't think we'll see it again, do you? Mina asked quietly, slightly trembling at the thought of facing that monster once again. I hope not, Izuku answered quietly while closing his eyes. But at least this time we'll be more prepared. In hindsight, I should have targeted that guy with all the hands over his body. That monster had low intelligence. Despite all of its quirks, it lacked any semblance of actual sentience. It would only attack after that guy ordered it to. Had I just targeted him then maybe. He trailed off after his words, shaking his head. We did the best we could while under duress, Shoto stated simply, gazing up at the ceiling. Even if it wasn't enough. Momo chuckled, though there was no humor in it. And then the media spins our story as if we're some trio of murderous robots. As if we weren't forced to fight for our lives against something that couldn't be killed. Her eyes began to water as she shook her head. I still hear that damn sniper. The recoil of the shot. The smell of gunpowder. The burning sensation of the ejected casings. I haven't slept since that day. Yeah, Izuku mumbled as he covered his eyes. Visions of his fire raining from above, incinerating the groups of villains and burning them alive. I haven't either. Shoto said nothing as he gazed blankly up at the ceiling. He merely closed his eyes, seeing his death at the hands of the Namu as he tried to put it down. His dual quirk failing to cause any damage as it shrugged off his fire and ice. Look at us, Mina mumbled quietly as she squirmed in the bed. She proceeded to move towards Izuku, laying her head atop his stomach. She ignored how he flinched in surprise. Just a group of trauma-bonded children. Trauma buddies. There was silence for several seconds following her words. Gyro snorted at the girl's words, causing the rest of the teens to laugh at her words. Even Todoroki managed to break a smile. Dude, you're so dumb. The purple-haired teen spoke through chuckles. It's a talent, Mina giggled as she closed her eyes, using Izuku's stomach as a pillow. A couple minutes passed by before the room grew silent, each teen slowly falling asleep. A group of broken children, bonded by a traumatizing experience. It was the start of one of the greatest hero teams to ever grace Japan. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through What If Introvert Deku Had a Flame Quirk. I hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did. A big shout out to Razuhfy for crafting such a compelling story. Don't forget to check out their profile on fanfiction.net for more amazing works. The link is in the description below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to What If Deku 2.0 for more fascinating explorations into the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we're always excited to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you guys in the next video.